Welcome, everyone. This is episode 2 of the Retro Movie Love podcast. That was Best Times from the Killer Party soundtrack. With me today is Ben from the Eyes of Ben Sher blog. Welcome, Ben.
Hello.
And you're from LA?
Oh, yeah. I live in Los Angeles, where some of these great movies were filmed that we're discussing today.
And also with me is Eric, all the way from
Dublin, where none of the films were filmed, but curiously, one of the films we will be discussing has an Irish connection.
Oh.
But I'll leave that little sense of mystery.
So today we'll be talking about holiday horror movies, and we're not specifically going to leave you with just Christmas horror movies. We're going to cover them all, or try to cover quite a few from different holidays, so that should be fun. What are you guys doing for the holidays?
I am not going back to the East Coast for the first time in 7 years, which must say I'm very happy about, even though I love my family. Flying across the country on the week before Christmas is the worst thing ever. I have a long list of movies that I'm planning to watch. We kicked off our holiday viewing last night with a movie that we'll be talking about today. So that's it. It's really low key.
I will be visiting family in the southeast of Ireland and then spending the rest of the Christmas holidays in the UK. So I'll be spending literally about 15 minutes of Christmas in my apartment.
I'll be traveling quite a distance across this country and sort of looking forward to it. It's nice to see family, but I have to admit, Christmas isn't my holiday. Is that weird to say?
No, it's not my holiday either, although my disdain for it is tempered when people give me nice Blu-rays.
Yeah, me too.
I know this year I made it a point to ask for Amazon gift cards instead of gifts, just in case I might want to build up my Blu-ray collection. Yesterday was Friday the 13th.
Yes, which isn't a holiday. Which isn't why
it's not a holiday.
It.
No, but it's kind of a holiday for us, isn't it? For those who like horror movies, at least. Did you guys watch any horror movies?
Well, on the Hysteria Continues, we're going to be recording tomorrow our episode on Friday the 13th, the final chapter.
Oh, nice.
So I was watching that.
Great.
And I suppose, a spoiler alert, it's one of my favorites. I think it's a really good entry in the series. And probably the last really, really good entry. I mean, there's parts 5 onwards have their charms, but I think they stopped being really good with part 4.
I watched several movies that we're going to discuss today. I usually watch a Friday the 13th movie on Friday the 13th, but the last month I literally watched the entire series twice. So I wasn't up to it yesterday.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. We had a Friday the 13th earlier this year. I think it was in June. I'm not 100%.
September, because you were guesting on our podcast.
Yes.
Meep.
Yeah. I was. And I had watched all the Friday the 13th then, so I think watching them yesterday would have been a little bit overkill, but pardon the pun.
Well, I watched a Christmassy themed one last night, but it probably will come up in conversation, so I won't mention it just yet.
So let's get the ball rolling, and let's do our top 3 holiday horror movies. Here we go. All right, Ben.
Yes.
Shall we start with you?
Yes.
Who slew Auntie Roo is the whisper of death that stalks along shadowed corridors.
Won't everybody leave me all alone? And Roo will be so lonely. Don't leave me. No!
You can't stay here. Aunt Roo is a witch.
Home, sweet home, where creatures stalk the darkness, where fearful illusion ends and frightful reality begins. Say goodnight to Auntie Roo, kiddies. It's dead time. Don't miss Shelley Winters, Mark Lester, and Ralph Richardson, who will never tell, and the teddy bear who knew. Who slew Auntie Roo? Who slew Auntie Roo? Who slew Auntie Roo? In color rated GP.
So yeah, Who Slew Auntie Roo? It's a really, really weird movie, and I think that it is, to me, one of the weirder holiday horror movies ever made. And I think what makes it even more bizarre is that I get the impression watching it that it was geared towards children. Because, in the early 70s, the PG-rated horror movies often were kind of, I think, for kiddie audiences, and this is definitely told from a child's perspective. So I think those are the only people I can imagine really wanting to go see it in the early 70s, other than people like us. Shelley Winters plays Auntie Rue, a former vaudeville star who lost her daughter in a freak, a freak banister sliding accident. Uh,
As you do.
I think in the early 20s, I think it takes place, and she has this big gingerbread looking mansion. And every year, she kind of on Christmas to compensate for her loss, she invites a select number of orphans from the local orphanage. And I think that's really, really rude, because there's this great scene where the head mistress of the orphanage is like, 10 of you will come and feast on goose and ice cream and get millions of presents, and the other 10 of you will eat apples and stay up for 1 hour late playing games because you won't be invited to Rue's house. And I was like, well, that really sucks. But anyway, so she brings all of these kids over to her house to just be spoiled and listen to her sing vaudeville songs for the whole night. And Mark Lester and his sister, Lester from Oliver, are bad seeds. They're bad kids at the orphanage. They weren't invited, but they sneak in. They remind me a lot of my cats, who are also a bad orphan brother and sister. And slowly, they just kind of get embroiled in Auntie Rue's crazy, weird world. Her house is filled with secret passageways. She keeps her daughter's skeleton in a cradle in the attic. Her ex-husband was a magician, so he has this crazy-ass room filled with scary magician toys. And the little boy, Mark Lester, becomes convinced that Rue is going to try to kidnap him and his sister and eat them. And you're never really quite sure who's the crazy one in this. Is it Mark Lester or is it Shelley Winters? But Shelley Winters sure is histrionic, and I just love her in this movie. So I don't know. I find this movie alternately very sad, unusually sad, and creepy and hilarious, and also weirdly comforting.
Oh, I totally hear you. You have to see it for Shelley Winters. She's pretty amazing in it. It's a tour de force performance, obviously. Her weirdness just escalates over the movie, and it kind of borders over the top. I might actually go over the top, but I think she's really interesting to watch. She's kind of mesmerizing, actually. I love that it's a Hansel and Gretel take. It's making it more kind of like you said, kind of a story for kids almost, but for adults because of the whole macabre way it presents its story. Like it starts off with her cradling a dead child in a crib or a bassinet. It's pretty creepy. I like the kid actors in this movie. I know kid actors in horror movies are kind of iffy in some regards, but the kids here are pretty fun. They take some pretty ballsy chances by sneaking into her house. They're orphans, so they want to get something for Christmas, and it's understandable, and they feel left out, and because they're the naughty ones, and you kind of feel bad for them right away, and you kind of empathize with them, so you understand why they sneak in and get into the house. But Shelley Winters takes a liking to them, and you can understand why. Part of the reason, I think, is one of the kids reminds her of her daughter, like you said, the one who slid down the banister to her death in one of the weirdest death scenes I've seen in a movie. It's kind of a weird movie for adults or for children. It kind of falls in between somewhere. So I'm not sure if either adults or children will love it. It's kind of one of those take it or leave it kind of movies. I know Curtis Harrington was a director, and he's kind of one of my favorites. He makes some really interesting movies. He did a movie called Night Tide. I think it was from the 60s, which was with Dennis Hopper. It was really atmospheric, really interesting movie. I urge people to check it out. And he also did a 70s movie, I think it was from 73, called The Killing Kind, with John Savage and Ann Southern, and that's a kind of a psycho riff. Another really interesting movie that kind of fell in between the cracks. It's been 40 years old now. It's on DVD. It's definitely worth checking out. He also did that movie with Shelley Winters and What's the Matter with Helen?
Yeah,
You guys
Debbie
seen that?
Reynolds.
Yeah. I might actually prefer that movie to this one. They're often double featured, I think. They were on a DVD. It certainly gets under your skin, especially that scene in the museum.
No, it just really did. That scene you're talking about, it really gives you a good idea of how, like, just what it's like to be creeped out in a strange environment when you're a child. Like, I always felt like, even just going to a friend's house, I kind of felt that sense of unease just being in somebody else's abode when I was little. And I think this movie really emphasizes that feeling, in that scene especially.
And the butler character, my God, was he a butler? He was really creepy. That guy kind of gave me nightmares.
He was in the evil villain in For Your Eyes Only, I think, as well, wasn't he?
Oh,
was he? Oh.
Yeah, he was creepy in that too, but he did get pushed off a cliff by 007, so hooray.
Like the chauffeur in Burnt Offerings, I confess I found him kind of creepy and sexy at the same time. Maybe that's just me.
I think that's just you.
Yeah, well.
He's all yours. Take him. Eric, what'd you think of this?
Yeah, I did. As Ben was saying, I found it just got this weird, is it a kid's film, is it not a kid's film vibe to it? Because it has all the hallmarks of kind of a 70s Disney movie.
Yeah.
But it's definitely... I can't imagine kids enjoying it because it's quite slow-paced and it's not exactly action-packed. And then for adults, I don't know, it's just, as you say, it falls between two stools, kind of, which means it's probably why it's languishing in obscurity. Certainly over here, I don't know how famous the film is in the States, but it's certainly not one that would appear regularly on television over here. I mean, I'd never seen it before I'd purchased the DVD in the early 2000s. But I do, the Hansel and Gretel elements are interesting because we've got so many, well, we've not got so many, there's at least 2 or 3, I think, Hansel and Gretel movies, sort of grown-up versions of them that are currently out at the moment, including one where the Wicked Witch, instead of tempting them with sweets and things, tempts teenagers in with marijuana. I think it's called Hansel and Gretel Get Baked. Is that what it's called? Anyway, it's not very good, but Who's Lou Auntie Roo is interesting. I thought. I mean, I wasn't that pushed about the actress who plays the young girl.
Yeah.
I didn't think she was terribly good. All her line delivery is kind of like but yeah, and as Ben was saying, I found it kind of sad. I mean, I ended up feeling really sorry for Auntie Roo at the end, and I thought to myself as the final credits were rolling, Mark Lester's character is the villain of this piece, in my opinion, because Auntie Roo is demented, but I don't think she means any harm.
Yeah, I always sort of felt that way too.
Yeah, and I don't think she. Spoiler alert! I don't think she deserves to be burned alive. I think that's quite a gruesome end for a character who I think people generally would feel sorry for. Maybe that's just me.
Yeah, it kind of works in the story, obviously, but yeah, seeing it on film happening to a character you're kind of invested in seems a bit harsh.
And then when it turns out, the whole thing is building up, oh, she's preparing this big feast and it's going to be them. Then it turns out, oh, she was just planning to, cook a pork loin or whatever at the end. Just like,
oops. Yeah. Yeah, and then, of course, the kids steal all the jewels as well, so it's win-win for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That struck me when I saw this in the theater originally, not in the 70s. They was playing weirdly at Lincoln Center, and I just remember being struck by how melancholy it was. And that was always... I agree with you, Michael. Curtis Harrington is, to me, a really great, underrated director, and a lot of his movies have that sad feeling. And he originally made gay experimental films in the, I think, 50s, even before Night Tide. So he has...
Are you talking about porn?
What? No, they're not porny at all. Like for people walking in hallways, and so he has a lot of interesting influences going into his movies, and he has a lot of sympathy for his crazy women, I think.
He went on. Speaking of crazy women, in the 80s, he ended up directing lots of episodes of Dynasty and the Colbys.
Yes, just so perfect.
Shelley Winters would have fitted nicely into that, except she would have had to have bigger shoulder pads.
Yes.
I love Shelley Winters.
Mm.
I don't just love her because we share a birthday or anything, but I love her.
You share Shelley Winters' birthday?
Yeah.
That's really glamorous.
She was a few older.
I share my birthday with Jerry O'Connell from Stand By Me.
I share my birthday with Quentin Tarantino, which is so not as exciting as either of those people.
I don't know. But for Jerry O'Connell, I share the exact same day and year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You're practically the same person.
Yeah, but you see, with him, he started out fat and got thinner, whereas for me, it was the reverse. Yeah.
He probably doesn't want to hang out with you. He might get tempted to go back the other way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I tempt him with my pride.
All right, so let's move on to Eric's number 3.
None of man's fantasies of evil can compare with the reality of Jaws. Did you see that? This is the extraordinary motion picture version of the best-selling novel, Jaws.
That's a 20-footer. 25. 3 tons on him.
Hold it up, he's coming straight for us. Don't screw it up now. Don't wait for me. Now! Shoot! Give him room, Brody! I can't, he's trying to run! Ah! Okay. Breaking up! Everybody out of the water.
Jaws, rated PG. Maybe too intense for younger children.
Yeah, ain't that the truth? Actually, that's, of course, Jaws, 1975. Not something I would consider a holiday film myself, but in conversations with Ben and Michael over the past few weeks, you did bring this up as a possible holiday movie choice. Of course, 4th of July, which we don't celebrate over here in Ireland, but I know it is quite a big deal to you guys in the States. So, yeah, not something I would normally consider a holiday movie, but I'm glad it is because it's one of my favourites. Of course, it's the story of Amity Island being terrorized by a killer shark, on the 4th of July weekend, which of course brings up problems for the mayor of Amity, who wants the tourists to flock to the island so they can make their yearly splurge of money. But of course, this just means extra food for the great white that's lurking on the shore. This is one I would consider a good entry point for horror, because I saw this quite young. On television, I should add. I was only 1 year old in 1975, as was Jerry O'Connell. The opening scene, I think, is possibly one of the strongest scenes ever to open a horror film. I just found it terrifying, mysterious, and it certainly would, if I didn't live on the coast, but if I had been living on the coast, it would have scared me out of ever going near the sea. It's without being violent, it's just incredibly shocking and jarring, and it's one of those very rare death scenes in horror films where you actually feel the absolute terror of the victim, where, as in, if you're watching something like Friday the 13th, the terror and the murder scenes are kind of fun, if that's not making me sound like a psychopath. But in that scene in Jaws where Chrissy goes out and gets killed, it just, you can feel her terror, which is probably why it's so scary. And then the same with the kid Alex, who goes out and is Lilo, and he gets chomped in a scene that's just so brilliantly executed. You sort of see it. You don't see any close-ups. You just see what happens from a point of view of somebody standing on the beach. And so for me, the first 70 minutes or so of Jaws are absolutely perfect, and it's just 5-star, and I'd agree with all the mainstream critics when they say it's an absolute masterpiece. It's after that, where it's just the 3 men on the boat hunting the shark, that the film sort of loses some of its momentum, and it's far less interesting to me, personally. I know that that's the highlight of the film for a lot of people, but I much prefer the sort of the opening 2/3 of the film. Hooper and Brody, I think, are 2 really, really likable characters. They're 2 kind of everymen who sort of represent, the average Joe Soap in the audience going to see the film. But the character of Quint, played by Robert Shaw, he's so slappable. I just can't stand him. He is horrible. He's like the worst horror movie bully times 17. I just I don't know if anyone else has the same issues with Quint that I do, but I just find him obnoxious to just such a terrible degree. So that, I mean, like when he's dominating the screen for that final third, that's why probably I find it less interesting, and it's probably why I find Jaws 2 as a sort of popcorn movie thrill ride, I find it a much more enjoyable experience because it keeps that momentum going all the way through to the end. Whereas I find that Jaws 1 sort of grinds to it doesn't grind to a halt, but it slows down considerably for its final third. But I still think it is an absolute masterpiece of a film.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I totally agree with you. I've always felt that when they get on the ship, I still like those scenes, but it's so much more fun when they're on the island and people are talking on the beach about what it's like to be a native Cape Codder, and then kids are getting killed, and all of those things are just my favorite moments. And one of the things that I love about this movie so much is that it really reminds you how great Steven Spielberg was, especially in the 70s and 80s, at adding a lot of character and a lot of local flavor to genre films, which always makes them so much more fun for me when you really know the townspeople in the village where the shark is eating everybody. It really feels like you're there, and I think that that's a lot of fun. And I miss that too. That Martha's Vineyard. I think it's not Cape Cod. It's Martha's Vineyard atmosphere that you lose when they're all on the boat. Yeah, I actually didn't see this movie until late in life. I only saw it about 4 years ago, and I was so pleased that it didn't seem kind of like all the hype had ruined it for me. I have so much fun every time I watch this movie, and I love Roy Scheider.
So I'm subject to Roy Scheider. I was reading in the latest issue of Fangoria, they have a retrospective on Jaws 2, and they talked to, is it Janos Swark is his name, the director, who says that Roy Scheider was a complete asshole to work with.
Oh yeah, not a surprise.
Yeah. Which kind of like it's something you don't like to hear, because he looks like he's such a laid back, likable persona in Jaws. I hate when you hear that people that you would sort of like on screen turn out to be less than likable off screen.
I've also heard some other interesting things about him. He was an intellectual, apparently. He was really, really smart, and he would often appear on radio programs talking about things like that that are much more intellectual than I would get into on radio.
Yes, well, that's probably why he didn't like being on the set of Jaws 2, because it's not the most intellectual film.
Probably not. But he was the lead.
I'm sure he had issues with Jaws eating a helicopter.
Yeah. But that's what makes Jaws 2 so much fun.
Exactly.
I watched Jaws a lot as a kid. It was a staple on TV. It was always on. It was like Superman and Wizard of Oz and Jaws were the three movies that were on like every week, it seemed like. And even though I was exposed to horror movies pretty early, Jaws always just stuck out. It was scary. I mean, I'm a city boy, and it's a movie about the water, so immediately right there, it's something that kind of frightened me. And then, we did go to the beach a lot as a kid, Coney Island to be specific. My grandmother would take us there every day, and after watching Jaws for the first time, I was scared to go in the water. I mean, it was frightening, but eventually I figured out that the sharks wouldn't come that close to the shore, and we were safe, hopefully, for now. The murders are really shocking and surprising, and they always stay with you. The movie's atmosphere of the New England town really works. I know they had a lot of problems on this movie with the shark, and for the most part, it's played down. You don't see the shark as much as you do in the later sequels, and I think that's what makes the movie work. I mean, the less you see of it, the better. It's that section of the movie, like both of you have a problem with once it's the three guys on the boat, that's when you start seeing more of the shark, and it kind of doesn't work as much. But You're engaged. You're engaged by the actors. I think, like I said, like you guys have said, Roy Scheider is a great actor, and I think he's the perfect lead here. And he's also in another movie I recommend you guys checking out called The Seven Ups from 1973. It's an action movie in the French Connection vein. It has some great car chases and New York City locations. And I've always liked him a lot as an actor, and when Jaws 2 rolled around and he was the lead, I love that. I like seeing him throughout the whole movie, taking the role on. It's hard to talk about Jaws because so much has been said about the movie. I know people are huge fans of the score, and I do love the score. The one negative about the score is I think it's maybe used a bit too much at times. Because it's a shark movie, it's set on the water for a good part of it. I would have loved to hear more silences in the movie, more sounds of the water, and sounds of nature. I love movies. I love nature runs amok movies. I'll probably be doing a podcast soon on it. And Jaws is one of the great ones. But I do like when nature is played up a bit more in those movies, and I think more silences in that film would have helped instead of having a score that's kind of nearly relentless. It's not. There are some silences in the movie, so it does have a break, and it's a fun score. But I would have loved to hear a little less of it, maybe.
Spielberg does fill his movies with lush orchestral scores all the time. So
yes, he loves a score that never ends.
If you want a scoreless shark movie, I haven't seen it in a long time, but I'm guessing one of the Italian rip-offs, it's the Great White, it was called. The Italians are known for sort of having less score, but also probably less action as well. To be honest,
Steven Spielberg is obviously a great director. Love him. I like watching some of the behind the scenes stuff on the Blu-ray, and that was fun to watch, especially that moment where Steven's watching the Academy Awards being announced and he totally gets snubbed for Best Director. His reaction's pretty interesting. I think he was snubbed and they picked Fellini instead. But what can you do? That's Fellini, and it was Amarcord, so I can totally understand that. I especially love Joe Spinell, the actor from Maniac. He was apparently with them at the time, and his reaction to Spielberg getting snubbed was pretty hilarious. He was kind of rallying and just couldn't understand why this man who clearly spent his sweat, blood, and tears making this movie was snubbed for Best Director. But obviously Spielberg later went on to he was made up for more than.
Yeah, with his quote-worthy movies.
Yeah. And right. I truly never do. I truly don't. I think of everything as like kind of post-Color Purple and pre-Color Purple, and I love the Color Purple as much as I love Jaws or E.T. or Close Encounters. But all of those pre-Color Purple movies, I really truly do think are better, for me anyway, than the more prestigious ones that came down the line.
I would agree.
Maybe that's like an obvious statement for horror nerds to say, but I do think that very deeply.
Anything else to add about Jaws?
I just want to say, I do have one more comment, going back to Roy Scheider. Jaws, really, one of the things I miss the most about the 70s are like nebbishy, neurotic action heroes who are like afraid to go in the water and just like afraid to get dirty, like Roy Scheider and Richard Dreyfuss in this movie. Mm-hmm. I just think that all action heroes should be like that, and they're not anymore. It makes me sad. Usually. Maybe I'm missing some.
Does anyone have a problem with Richard Dreyfuss's character surviving at the end? Because in the book he dies, but of course at the end of the film he reappears, pops up out of the water, and I'm sure that probably had a few critics sort of rolling their eyes at the time.
I didn't really have a problem with it in this movie, but I kind of have a problem that it kind of inspired so many movies to do the same exact thing.
Yeah.
I just never really thought about whether I minded it or not. Yeah, he can live. That's okay.
It's not like at the end, I suppose it was the final Matrix film, was it? Where, I think all the Matrix films, doesn't Keanu Reeves come back through the power of love or something? Or something ridiculous that makes you want to vomit.
I couldn't make it after the first one.
Yeah.
That was enough. So moving on. Let's do my number 3.
Tonight, an ABC premiere presentation. Eternity is about to play a nasty little trick.
Who's there?
On the carefree kids of Pitchboard Cove.
Figured out what you're gonna wear to the party yet tonight? Demons, arise.
Dad!
Come heed my bidding on this night of nights.
Halloween, my favorite time of year.
Keep playing it.
I'm not afraid of death. I'm going for it.
The party could go on forever in the midnight hour. Next.
So it's Halloween time in the small New England town of Pitchford Cove, and some really curious high school students decide to steal a few items from the local witchcraft museum and decide it would be totally cool to recite an old curse at the local cemetery. The dead, which also include the usual zombies, cheerleaders, little people, werewolves, and vampires/witches, start to come back to life and wreak absolute havoc on the town. It's up to the nerdy Phil, played by Lee Montgomery, to save the day and maybe even fall in love with one of the better-looking dead people in the process. It's a Midnight Hour. It was released on November 1st, 1985 as a TV movie from ABC. And why do I like The Midnight Hour? It's definitely a silly movie. It's probably the silliest movie, or one of the silliest movies on this list. I might have been guilty of adding more. It's the first Halloween movie that I saw as a TV movie. I had previously, I believe, watched the John Carpenter Halloween films, and just seeing something on TV that was Halloween was really cool. Something coming specifically from TV, and it's very much about the holiday. It's about, like I said, this small town which has a witchcraft kind of background and dead people coming back to life, and the possibility of a character falling in love with them. It's just kind of charming in a way. It stars Lee Montgomery, who was in Girls Just Want to Have Fun. I'm gonna make it my business to mention Girls Just Want to Have Fun in every podcast, by the way. Here he is, this high school student. He's kind of nerdy, he has big glasses, so I guess that's why he's nerdy. But he's also super hairy. I've never seen a hairier teenage kid in a movie before. But here he is. And he falls in love with a dead cheerleader, which I think was really cute. As you do.
Who hasn't fallen in love with a dead cheerleader?
Exactly. It happened to the best of us. It's a very PG movie, but it's kind of a step above the TV offerings of the time. It has a quirky kind of edge to it, which I liked, but it's very lighthearted, good-hearted at the same time. So it's something that's also appealing to me. I like the score by Brad Fiedel. He also did genre films like Just Before Dawn, Fright Night, The Terminator, and Blue Steel, starring Jamie Lee Curtis, another actress I have to mention every podcast. Clearly it's filmed like at the backlot of Universal, I think it was. It's very much a kind of a TV movie in that regard. It feels like it's a stage almost, but I think it's well done. There's enough atmosphere in it to make it seem like it's Halloween, and you get the vibe pretty much off the bat with the kid, the paper boy, who cuts himself and gets blood all over the newspaper and starts throwing it at every house, including the cemetery, which apparently is in the middle of the town, which is really strange. It looks like it's right in the middle of the square. It has a lot of fun actors in it. Sherry Belafonte, who was on Hotel, a show I liked a lot, starring James Brolin. She's fun to watch. She actually has a musical number in this movie. A fun dance sequence that was very, very much like Thriller. There's a lot of fun scenes with her and her ancestor who comes back to life, and whose biggest scary thing is flapping her cloak around, making arm movements, and that's, I guess, supposed to be scary, but it's kind of fun to watch. I like the zombies in the movie. There's some silly ones, like one played by Mark Blankfield. He kind of he's the zombie that's kind of bumbling around throughout the whole movie. He's an actor I like. He was on a show called Fridays, which was like a Saturday Night Live ripoff, but it was a fun show. And he was in a movie called Jekyll and Hyde Together Again, which I think is a lot of fun. It's kind of like the airplane of Jekyll and Hyde movies. Worth checking out. There are some interesting scenes in the movie sprinkled throughout. I like some of the genre vets, like Kevin McCarthy showing up as an abusive dad, and Dick Van Patten showing up as Lee Montgomery's father as a dentist, and then at some point he becomes a zombie dentist, which is a lot of fun to see. How do you guys feel about this film?
I'd never heard of Midnight Hour until you'd mentioned it to me. And having watched it, I wouldn't have guessed it was a made-for-TV movie if I didn't know that going in, because I thought it had a real Fred Decker type of vibe to it, like Monster Squad or Night of the Creeps, or even Return of the Living Dead Part 2. I thought it sort of had elements of that as well. I enjoyed it. I mean, it's very much, as you said, kind of safe horror. But then again, you could say that about Joe Dante movies like Gremlins and that type of thing. I really enjoyed it. And as you said, the dance sequence did remind me very much of the Thriller video, which I'm sure was one of the reasons this got a green light, was the Thriller video would have been huge around the mid-'80s. I also like the use of How Soon Is Now by the Smiths on the soundtrack. That was a great inclusion. And the soundtrack's actually quite good, because TV movies would normally be using sort of very, very generic library music, whereas this is using like the Midnight Hour. Obviously it's in there, and what's the other one, the other famous song they have on the soundtrack? Can you remind me, Michael?
Pale Moon Rising.
Bad Moon Rising. That's
yes,
it, of course.
It's like every song basically from American Werewolf in London.
American Werewolf in London, well. yeah. But no, again, I hadn't been familiar with it. I was won over the minute Lee Montgomery came on screen with his huge 80s glasses. I was like, yes, I'm there. Then when the Smiths came on, I was like, oh, this is even, this doubles my enjoyment. And I did love, is it Shari Belafonte, you said is her name?
Mm-hmm.
Actress who plays Melissa. She was great fun every time she was on the screen. I mean, it's not for everyone. If you're looking for torture porn, Saw type levels of violence, you're going to be sorely disappointed. But if you like things like Monster Squad, or is it Graveyard Disturbances, one that Lamberto Bava did in the late 80s. It has that type of feel about it. It's kind of cheesy teenage The Gate type level of horror. I really enjoyed it, and thank you for introducing me to it.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, watching this movie, it really made me think that one of the reasons that I love holiday movies, especially maybe Halloween movies, is they kind of give you everything you could want the holiday to be, but that it never really is going to be. Like, watching that, I was like, yes, this is the ideal Halloween. I want there to be these glamorous diva witches. I want cheerleader ghosts. I want zombies and werewolves, and Wolfman Jack playing oldies all night, and old cars. And I want to be on the weird, like, Back to the Future old small town set. That's how I want every Halloween to be. So movies provide you such a great portal to that, since your, at least my life is never that interesting. Usually on Halloween I end up like doing work all day and then eating a fun-sized candy bar at night and watching Halloween, which isn't anywhere near like being in the Midnight Hour. I think that Philip, was that the character played by Lee Montgomery? He is such a likable protagonist. I love that he's just this dorky, Halloween obsessed, shoulder padded blazer wearing high school, or I loved his like glamorous glam Barnabas Collins vampire costume and how excited he was about it. It just made me so happy. I love this movie, and I mentioned it briefly, but I love that Wolfman Jack was the DJ narrating it all, because it gave the whole thing this kind of American Graffiti but with vampires vibe, which I think is a perfect idea, and somebody should have thought of it even sooner than 1985.
What was the plot point about his glittery wig being really itchy? Did that strand go anywhere, or did I miss something?
He was maybe the nerd who was trying to look cool with the glam wig, and he just got a rash because of it.
I thought the rash was going to turn out to be something supernatural and turn a monster.
Kind of like
it was just a rash.
Just a typical crappy Halloween costume. Just
all right.
They're pretty engaging characters. I liked Dee Dee Pfeiffer, the blonde, Michelle Pfeiffer's sister. She kind of pops up. She's one of the friends.
And Cindy Morgan from Tron is in there as a sexy teacher.
Oh my god, I love her.
I love the sexy teacher who did not take any crap.
Her David Bowie Modern Love costume was really cool.
Oh yes, yeah.
I wish I had a teacher like
that.
I felt bad for her. I feel bad. I don't want to spoil the movie completely, but she's one of the few characters who dies. And then at the end, when things kind of go crazy and the spell is recanted, everyone kind of disappears. Does she remain dead?
That's what I was wondering. Yeah. So I was thinking for as a PG kind of rated horror film, I assume everything's okay at the end once they've undone the curse.
Yeah, but nobody shows up. It's kind of like almost like everyone's gone, and that's it. I felt really bad.
Maybe it was an apocalyptic ending then.
Maybe. 1985 was a pretty good year for a horror comedy. Reanimator and Return of the Living Dead were probably the big ticket.
Fright Night was another one.
Fright Night, yes.
Oh yeah.
It's like definitely a transitional period for horror movies. They were slowly becoming more comedy than horror. And this movie definitely has a lot more comedy than horror. Like the LeVar Burton character is pretty silly. I like that his name is Vinny. He's like something out of Grease. It's a fun movie. Don't go into it thinking you got to be scared, and it's worth seeing. And like you mentioned with the Smith song, "How Soon Is Now," I think it is. I think they just play the instrumental part of it. This movie introduced me to the Smiths.
Oh,
I
go.
Wasn't aware of them until then, and I sought that song out, and that's how I got into the Smiths.
Oh, I'm just looking up the director's other filmography. He made the Child's Play 3 as well.
Ooh, not my favorite in the series, I must say.
No,
that's
Jack
my
Bender,
least favorite.
But he also directed 2 episodes of Fame, best TV series ever.
I do love me some Fame.
There's also a scene I remember at a movie theater where the Lee Montgomery character and the cheerleader are kind of walking through town, and there's a movie theater. There, on the marquee, is a movie called Deadly Messages, which was a TV movie from that same year starring Kathleen Beller. It was a horror TV movie, or a thriller TV movie, and that's on the marquee. It was directed by the same director, Jack Bender.
Have you seen that movie?
I have. It's pretty good.
Yeah. I always wonder when I see a movie on a marquee like that if they made it up or if it's actually real.
There were a few others there. I didn't check to see if they were all real, but that one stuck out. I'm like, oh, Deadly Messages. And
that was one of my favorite scenes, seeing that old school 6-screen multiplex. It made me so nostalgic.
Those characters are very nostalgic. Just the way they just kind of walk through town, and it recalls kind of like a 50s movie in a way. I mean, her character, I think, is supposedly from the 50s or 60s. It's not quite clear, but it's a nostalgic piece. And it's also a 80s thriller riff. It's a weird mix, but I think it works.
I feel like someday you should do a podcast just on 80s, 50s nostalgia movies. That 80s, 50s nostalgia is one of my favorite things in the entire world.
It was very prominent in music and in movies at the time, I think. A lot of bands like Blondie were kind of recalling 50s, early 60s, and it's interesting.
You probably didn't in the States get the gift of Shakin' Stevens, did you?
No.
He was known colloquially as the Welsh Elvis. And he was big. He was big over here in the 80s. You know, doing songs in the style of 50s rock and roll, but not very good.
Sounds lovable, though.
Yep.
We did have the ubiquity of the Kylie Minogue locomotion.
Oh, there you go.
That was big, wasn't it? I remember that being pretty big.
So big.
It was, yeah.
And then she disappeared, and then 10 years later mysteriously came back. It's one of the weirdest things that's ever happened in my life. And happiest things, too.
Was it a dance remix? Or something?
When she came back?
When Kylie Minogue came back.
Yeah, she never disappeared from our shores, so...
All right, so let's take a break, and we'll be back right after this.
I'm hung up in a grave situation. The only thing I dig is got a bad reputation. Roll my eyes back inside my head, spend my days asleep in a pine box bed. Tonight's the night that you'll forever Everybody's gonna buy it, get dead. You got it. Sooner or later, everybody's gotta do it. So get the hang now, and I'll walk you through it. Move real slow like you're on the moon. Just watch me close, you'll get it soon. Cross on over to the other side, all your troubles will be over. So believe me when I say that I'm dead, you're dying. Everybody should try it, get dead. Get high, don't fight it. Everybody's gonna buy it, get dead. You're dying. Everybody should try it, get dead.
And we're back. Hope you enjoyed that. Now we're going to do Ben's number 2. Here we go.
Saturday.
She is slowly poisoning me to death.
A bedridden man summons his 4 daughters home to save his life.
If for some evil reason I'm ever accused by anyone of killing, I will not be the one who wakes up screaming.
Sally Field, Walter Brennan, Jessica Walter, Julie Harris, Eleanor Parker. Home for the holidays, Saturday nights, Owl Theater at 11.
I can't believe that actually exists. That's just so impressive. I'm going to have to YouTube that and watch it.
He sounds so enthusiastic as well.
Yeah, it's almost incongruous. Like he's introducing a Hallmark romantic comedy. But he should be so enthusiastic about talking about this movie. Watching it again, I was thinking, I am the one who subjects you both to melodrama like every time. This is sort of the turning point of holiday slasher movies. It is, as you heard, the greatest cast ever assembled. Just such hardcore diva power here, plus Walter Brennan. It is the story about four sisters who are summoned home by their father to come home for the holidays because he thinks that his wife, Julie Harris, is trying to poison him to death. And there's lots of dysfunction in this family. Their mother killed herself. Possibly the father was to blame. Julie Harris might have murdered her previous husband. The sisters are just messes. It's basically like the cast of Interiors walked into a horror movie, which that might not be a description that's accessible for most people, but you have one sister who's the detached actress, one sister who's the histrionic, alcoholic mess, not surprisingly played by Jessica Walter 2 years after Play Misty for Me. Eleanor Parker is sort of the codependent mother hen. Eleanor Parker, may she rest in peace. She just passed away, so I'm so happy we're celebrating her today. And then Sally Field is the baby. Everybody keeps saying, oh, she's the baby. So it's this combination of the sisters fighting with each other, trying to figure out whether Julie Harris is trying to kill the father or whether he's trying to kill himself or whether somebody else is trying to kill the father. And then suddenly a killer wearing a raincoat with a pitchfork starts knocking people off one by one. So it's this perfect combination for me of total 70s TV movie soap opera, mystery, and slasher movie goodness. And thunder and lightning are used to dazzling cliched effect here. Literally every time something scary, quote, scary or emotional happens, there is thunder and lightning. And I'm like, thank you for letting me know how to feel. It just makes life easier. So I love this movie. I think I just think it's perfect and one of my favorite TV movies ever made. I'm interested to hear what you guys think about it.
Totally with you on that one. It's not a movie I watch all that often. I haven't seen it in a long time. I have it on VHS, and it's so good. The cast, I mean, that's what I go to immediately when I think of this movie. It's a great cast. All the actresses are great, and they're all playing very defined different characters. And there's the bitchy, resentful one, the druggy one, the young one, the older, responsible one, like you mentioned. They're all very different, but they work very well together. I can't say if I have a favorite. Maybe Jessica Walter. I just like her a lot. And obviously, she went on to Arrested Development. She's great on that, and her character being a druggie or alcoholic kind of recalls that a bit. When I watch the movie, I immediately think of Arrested Development, and I enjoy seeing that. There's a great atmosphere to the movie. It's a TV movie, and it's very much a TV movie, but there is a Christmas atmosphere within the house. Outside of the house is a different story. It's very much a movie about a rainstorm as well, or a very fake rainstorm. But I like that about it. I like when there's a lot of crazy weather in a movie. It kind of heightens everything. It's obviously orchestrated to heighten things, but it's done very well here. And even though if it does look fake, I think it works for me. Another reason why I like this movie, the actresses, especially Julie Harris. She's great. I forgot to mention her. Sorry. But another reason why I like this movie is the fashions. Jessica Walter and the bitchy character specifically are very, very much fashionistas, if that's you want to use that terrible word. They make a nice contrast to the older Eleanor Parker character, and Julie Harris, who's kind of very dowdy, and the younger one, who's kind of hasn't come into her own yet. There's some interesting things going on with the costumes. I enjoyed watching that. It's also very much a Christmas movie in its spirit. It's about a family coming together for their patriarch, in this case, a patriarch who thinks someone's trying to kill him, which makes it a horror holiday movie quite instantly. I love that it's, I think you would deem it a proto-slasher, Eric? You're the resident slasher expert.
Yes, because we did cover this one on Hysteria Continues as a, quote, proto-slasher. Because, as Ben was saying, the killer in the red, or the yellow sort of Mac is very reminiscent of certain sequences in the first Friday the 13th, I thought.
Yeah, it's really surprising how much it seems like it could be an 80s slasher movie, but for the fantastic all-star cast and the excessive melodrama.
Yeah, I love that.
Well, I don't understand how anyone could think Valine's mother was going to kill someone. That's just beyond me how somebody could think that.
She was played up so much as a killer. That as those of us who watch slasher movies know that when someone's played up so much as a killer, obviously they aren't.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Except for Friday the 13th: A New Beginning.
Yes.
Where they kind of put a big neon sign over who the killer is, and then it turns out to be him.
Yes. In that sense, that movie was genius.
Despite your expectations by laying everything out before you, just way too much. We didn't realize, people thought that wasn't intentional, but obviously they were just smarter than all of everybody.
But to me, Julie Harris has always been Valine's mom in Knots Landing. I know to most people she's the actress from The Haunting, but that's one of the reasons why I quite enjoy Home for the Holidays. Probably not as much as you two enjoy it. And Meep, I'll have to disagree with you. I don't think there is any Christmas atmosphere in the film at all, which is disappointing for me, because it probably would work better if it felt more Christmassy, if that's the right term, because all the Christmas slashers tend to have some kind of Christmas vibe about them, but Home for the Holidays just has none for me. It seems like it's just an average rainy day, or just an average day in Dublin during the summer is what it looks like to me. But I do enjoy it. I like it, the brevity of it. I think it's 74 minutes, but as it's a TV movie, of course, again, don't go expecting decapitations and disembowelments, because that's not what it's about. It is atmospheric, I'll give it that, and it is melodramatic. It's kind of soap opera-ish, but that's a good thing for a made-for-TV movie, which is, I know they're big fans. I'm kind of iffy about a lot of made-for-TV material, but I do enjoy this one. I think it's quite strong, and I don't know. Did you guys guess the killer's identity early on, or
no?
Because when I'm rewatching it now, it's like, okay, it's kind of obvious, but I don't recall getting it right watching it the first time.
I think I was surprised the first time. I felt the same way watching it. I was trying to remember because it does seem obvious now, but I don't think I guessed it.
Yeah. So that's a good thing. I assume like a lot of people watching it for the first time then will the mystery will keep them hooked. And as I said, 75 minutes, you can't go wrong. I wish more films these days were that length.
Yes, seriously.
I was watching
I agree.
one film I was watching during the week was Tron Legacy. Speaking of Tron earlier, and Cindy Morgan, and it just goes on way too long. It's just over 2 hours, and there's barely enough plot to keep it going on for 2 minutes. To be honest.
I want to add, even though I said in my first description that it's scary in quotes, when I first saw this movie in the middle of the night on a cruddy old VHS tape from the video store, I actually did think that there were parts of it that were creepy, some of the kind of chase scenes, because it does have a good atmosphere, and I think it genuinely kind of creates a feeling of dread if you watch it at the right time.
I think so. I wouldn't disagree with that. I think certainly the outdoor sequences where Sally Field has been menaced are very well done, I thought.
I just wish Sally Field had been the final girl in more movies. I'm so glad there's one, but I think that could have been a really great career for her. And I love that she's a graduate student. There are so few movies where they're graduate students, so I always get so happy.
Or they could have added slasher elements.
Exactly. I think there needs
like
to be a slasher movie about graduate school. There is so much fodder, but I don't think anyone would go to see it except for a graduate student.
Yeah, well, if you give any killer a pitchfork, and that's menacing enough, I think.
Yeah, that's true.
One of the most menacing weapons you can wield is a pitchfork, I think.
I think part of why this is a good TV movie is because it's directed by John Llewellyn Mox, and he made some of my favorites like The Night Stalker, Nightmare in Banham County, No Place to Hide, Smash Up on Interstate 5. He was a really good director of TV, and there was a series called Circle of Fear, and I urge you guys checking that one out if you haven't seen it already. The very first episode was helmed by Moxie. It was called The New House. It's really scary. It's really good. You guys should check that one out. One of my favorite directors of TV, and it was produced by Aaron Spelling, who went on to make some fun TV.
Of course.
He produced a lot of really great horror TV movies in the early 70s, I must say. He also did Satan School for Girls, which is an utter classic of the genre.
And his loins spawned Tori Spelling.
Who I love, too.
I love, too, as well. I was waiting for you to say that's another horror he created. But no, I like Tori Spelling.
I would never say that about Tori Spelling.
No, neither would I. As a 912 aficionado, I'd never say anything bad about any of them. Well, except maybe for Andrea Zuckerman.
Really? I love Andrea Zuckerman.
I do. I love her, but she's also kind of annoying as well. But I love that about her.
She's a little bit
weird.
Blanket.
Yeah, she is. And also, I think she's a bit too old to be in high school.
Yeah, she's totally like 40. But I mean, as somebody who felt like I was 40 in high school, I take her as just a physical manifestation of that feeling.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, that was Home for the Holidays. Let's go on to Eric's number 2.
In this town on Valentine's Day, everybody loses their heart. It looks like Harry Warden's back in town. In the town of Valentine Bluffs, there are many ways to die. Take your pick. My Blind. Rated R.
Yeah, the 1981 original My Bloody Valentine is my number 2 pick. I suppose probably for very obvious reasons. It's the story of the sleepy Canadian mining town of Valentine's Bluffs, which is haunted by a past tragedy where the mine caved in and the sole survivor was forced to turn to cannibalism to keep himself alive until he could be dug to safety. And then a killer comes back 20 years later to off anyone who shows any passing interest in Valentine's Day, which is the date the original thing happened on. What I love about My Bloody Valentine, I suppose, is that you were saying about there's no slashers about grad students. There's very few slasher movies about ordinary, everyday working folk. It's always partying high school people or people at summer camps, whereas this one is young people working in a mine in a sort of northern sleepy anonymous town. So it's very atmospheric. It's very moody, even when it's above the ground, but even more so when it goes below the ground into the mine. It's a great location for a slasher with a sort of labyrinthine maze, of tunnels and places for killers to hide or people to run to. One of the real aces up the sleeve of My Bloody Valentine is the incredibly creative deaths. I mean, everyone was going on at the time about Tom Savini this and Tom Savini that, but it's the effects in My Bloody Valentine, I think, are far more adventurous. And if I was any kind of podcaster, I would have researched to see who the effects artist was on My Bloody Valentine, but I don't know off the top of my head. Is it Tom Berman? Am I wrong? Well, I could be wrong. Anyway, but things like, I love of course, it was released in its full uncut version a couple of years back, which is tremendous to watch. One of the standout scenes is where the girl Sylvia gets impaled on a shower head, with the shower head coming out of her mouth. The old Crazy Ralph character, again, if I'd done my research, I would have written down what the character's name was, but I can't remember. But he gets a pickaxe that goes up through his chin, and then the tip of it comes out of his eye socket. You get to see all of these in sort of gory close-up, and the effects are really, really good. I mean, I can't think of one dodgy-looking effect in the film. But, I mean, it's not all about the murder. I mean, there's plenty of suspense as well. There's interesting characters, and when I say interesting, the two male leads in it are quite unlikable characters because they're bickering over the female lead, who is a likable enough character, which is kind of odd thing to do, because normally you'd have your very defined goody two shoes lead character, and then you'd have maybe brainless teenagers and people somebody who wants to do drugs and liquor character. But this one, it goes out on its own sort of tangent. It's quite a different feel character-wise to other slasher movies of the time. I think it's a great blueprint for what makes a good slasher film, because I was saying about momentum when I was talking about Jaws, and this one is a film I think that has a great pace to it. It knows exactly when to put a graphic kill in to keep the thing flowing. There's a film that was released in the same year in 1981 called The Prowler, which again had fantastic special effects, this time by Tom Savini, but it gets its pacing all wrong. It has this blistering opening sequence and then comes to a complete halt for about 4 minutes before, coming back for a pretty spectacular final third. But whereas My Bloody Valentine just keeps propelling along really nicely. So great effects, suspense, interesting characters. It's a brilliant movie, and get to see it in its uncut form if you can, because you get to see all that effects man whose name I can't remember. You get to see all his hard work finally after all these years. If only they'd do the same for some other films of that era. Friday the 13th Part 2 probably being one of my favorites.
I love this movie. It's definitely one of the better slasher movies of the time. It's 30 years later and it still feels very vital. I like the atmosphere of the film. I like that it's about minors, although I don't think I could ever be a minor, mostly because I don't think I could.
Are you saying you like minors? Hello, police.
A minor in a mine.
Oh, sorry, I got confused. Sorry.
Let's be very clear about that one. It has all the stock characters. Like, it has the prankster character, can't get laid. It has the goody girl, but she's kind of nice. It has a kind of. There isn't a really slutty character in this one. I'm not sure if the Patty character would.
Yeah, isn't she the actress who was in the film we discussed in the dance one, Heavenly Bodies?
Yeah, that's her. She makes a comment about wearing a slutty dress or something, but
yeah,
I don't think
it's
she
kind of
falls in that stock.
A foreshadowing, ironic comment. She says, I'm wearing a dress cut down to here and cut up to there. I don't know if I'll get out of there alive.
Right. It's a pretty clever movie in that regard. They do set things up. I like that there's an older character, Mabel from the laundromat. I kind of wish Madame Mabel lived longer.
For her.
Her death was terrible. I was disturbed.
Yeah, I felt so sorry for Mabel.
Especially in the uncut version, where you see her bloody corpse kind of spinning around in the dryer.
Yeah.
It's just so nasty. That whole scene is just so well done. Well done, though. Like the upside down hearts. which kind of are a big clue already for the sheriff that something's wrong. I like that the killer had a lot of time on his hands to put all the...
Another clue for him is sort of the human hearts in the box as well, covered in blood.
Yes.
That's a subtle clue, yeah.
It's a love triangle, and that's pretty stock in some movies, but it's the theme here. It's what drives the killer. It's what drives the main characters. TJ needs to really own up to the fact that he left town and can't always get what he wants. I mean, I feel like that character keeps bemoaning that he lost his life there, even though he left it. And I can't really feel bad for him. Like you said, the character may be a little unlikable because of that. But you can see that he's struggling with it too. Like he can't help but feel his feelings for Sarah. And she's a little pouty. She talks about her problem a lot of being in the middle of TJ and Axel. I can't really feel too bad for her. I mean, that's just deal with it.
I know. Exactly. I never feel bad for the person in the love triangle who both of the other people want. It's just like, stop complaining. You're lucky that one person is in love with you, let alone two.
Yeah.
Ben, did you like that big melodramatic scene by the ocean? Since you love melodrama.
Why am I not even remembering the big melodramatic scene from the ocean? I just watched this. What scene are you talking about? Give me a little more information.
Where TJ is apologizing to Sarah about running away and he's like, he's so damn sorry, and they're by the ocean.
Oh yes, okay, I do, which is very reminiscent of the melodramatic scene in Prom Night between.
I was just thinking.
Yeah. Yes, I love when slasher movies takes time out of like that to have a big melodramatic love scene. And it actually, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later, but I think that it really puts the lie to one of the big stereotypes about slasher movies, that they were totally geared towards like a 12-year-old male audience, because there's a great book called Blood Money by Richard Noel, I think, that actually argues that they were very purposefully also geared towards female audiences, which is not to say that a female audience is the only audience that's going to love a big melodramatic love scene, but that's what the filmmakers thought. And I think that was a great example of it, and really explains, I think, why I'm drawn to these slasher movies as well.
In Scream 2, where they're showing the footage from Stab, which is the fictional movie based on the events of Scream 1, if you can follow me, there's a great melodramatic scene involving our friend Tori Spelling. That reminds me of that kind of scene from Prom Night and My Bloody Valentine.
That's the fight where she has the fight with Billy about...
Yes, and she's like, oh, Billy, no. And it's real over the top. It's quite funny, and I think... Because they make a joke at Tori Spelling's expense in Scream 1, don't they? And I think it was very game of her to come in Scream 2 and play that role.
Totally. It was so cool of her.
The melodrama is nicely balanced with some of the gruesome horror. I actually like the backstory of Harry Warden and the idea of someone resorting to cannibalism when trapped with his coworkers and friends. There was a movie in the 70s called The Severed Arm that kind of used the same conceit. Have any of you guys seen this?
No, I haven't.
I have. It is. It's where they had draw straws to see whose arm they'll eat, and then they cut off his arm, and then about 30 seconds later they're rescued. It's like...
I always found that quite
worst
funny.
luck ever, yeah.
The thing that one of the things that I loved about this movie, and I might be making national stereotypes here, but this really felt Canadian to me. Like there's something about these people, this place, that it just felt like Canada. And I don't know if that's at all accurate or not, but I think part of it is that they're all so nice, and that's a stereotype about Canadian people, which might or might not be true. But like, you mentioned that it's usually with slasher movies, it's these horny, decadent teenagers like getting wasted and destroying their parents' houses. But here, they just want to have like a nice party with like a pool table at like a rec hall, and it all just seemed very responsible. And I kind of enjoy that.
Except they do want to party in the mine, which I think is a terrible idea.
When we discussed this on Hysteria Continues, there's myself from Dublin and Justin from Bristol. We couldn't tell how Canadian it was, whereas our two friends from the States were saying, it feels so incredibly Canadian. But I suppose to a European audience, it doesn't feel any different to an American production. Is that?
They drink a lot of moose beer.
I've said something wrong, haven't I?
No. But what I'm wondering is, do American audiences actually able to identify what something feels or is Canadian, or are we just totally wrong, but we're arrogant? I'm not really sure.
Well, they were saying it was like the fashions and sort of you can tell by the sort of architecture that it was Canadian.
Yeah.
Whereas we wouldn't pick up on those things. And they said the accents as well, whereas I can't really tell the difference between a Canadian and an American accent a lot of the time.
Yeah, there were a few
definitely some
subtle
scenes, yeah.
about, or, the things happening there, which I always like in movies, too.
When he says, "I'm so damn sorry," by the ocean, that's a big tip-off that he has an accent a bit.
I'll be discussing accents later as well. Yeah.
Directed by George Mahaka, who was...
Yes.
Who directed a 70s teen sex comedy that I liked called Pinball Summer. I think it was also known as Pickup Summer. I might have it on DVD as that. I can't remember. It has half the cast of My Bloody Valentine in it.
Well, I see a lot of these Canadian movies around the time. You can see familiar faces.
Right. They were even pumping out sex comedies or slasher movies up there with all the tax shelter money. He also did a weird movie called The Blue Man from the mid-'80s about astral projection that starred Karen Black. It's another movie I have in my collection that I think is kind of interesting.
That sounds great.
There's not many movies about astral projection. I think Insidious from a few years ago touched on it.
Manhattan Baby, which we were talking about off screen, as it were. That's about astral projection, kind of.
Oh, yeah.
No?
I haven't thought about that one.
All I remember about that movie
also...
is like a sand dune and a woman and like worms, but I do remember loving it.
It is 100% bonkers. I need to rewatch it, I think.
Another very Canadian movie that George Mahalka did was called The Psychic. It was from the early 90s. I think it was 91. It starred Catherine Mary Stewart, Zach Galligan, Michael Nouri from our favorite Flashdance. It's very snowy. It feels very much like winter. It's not set during Christmas, where I might have picked it if it were. But it's very snowbound. It's very Canadian. It's a very weird movie, but I think it's worth checking out as well. He was a pretty good director.
I have a vague memory that Ali Sheedy was in that. Was she in another movie called Psychic, or am I just wrong?
She might have been. She's definitely not in this one.
I'll look it up.
Yeah, I don't see her name listed here. She wasn't she in one called Fear, where she played a psychic or something?
Oh, I think you're right. I have seen both, but
right.
I think I'm thinking of Fear. Sorry to kill the conversation with my traumatic, mixed-up Ali Sheedy memories.
My Bloody Valentine is just one of those slasher movies that we're just gonna love. My only problem with it, I think, is the chase. I feel like goes on slightly too long towards the end. I feel like
at the end.
Yeah, I feel like it goes on a bit, like maybe like 15, 20 minutes of screen time or something. Just felt a little long, but has a great payoff, so
it does.
It's worth it.
That was just such an amazing set piece, that mine, and that was inspired filmmaking. Did anybody see as a coda My Bloody Valentine 3D?
I did.
Thoughts?
I thought it was okay. I did see it in 3D in the cinema, and certainly it was a unique experience to see a completely naked woman, apart from all she wears is high heels, running around in 3D with her boobs wobbling. I don't mind remakes as such. I thought this one was one of the better ones. Certainly far better than the Halloween or Friday the 13th remakes. It didn't capture the feel of the original My Bloody Valentine, I didn't think, but I thought it was a decent enough attempt. But once again, it falls into that trap of sort of modern horror where everyone has to be kind of like 22 years old.
Yes.
You have the sheriff of the town, who I can't remember the actor's name, but he looks like he's sort of early 20s.
Yeah.
Now, everyone looks like they're early 20s apart from Tom Atkins.
There is no Mabel, the laundry store owner, in the remake.
No,
Madame Mabel.
But I thought it was okay. I thought it was all right. What did you guys think of it?
I haven't seen it since it came out in the theater. I wasn't crazy about it, to be honest. I thought the 3D was pretty good.
The 3D I thought was impressive. Yeah.
I fell
but other than
asleep
that,
throughout the entire second half, so I didn't get to see any of the scenes in the mine or anything. And watching the original, I was like, oh, that might have been good in 3D. I wish I had not fallen asleep for it.
So yeah, falling asleep on a movie is probably not the best review.
No, that happened to me in Star Trek: The Motion Picture when I suppose, would have been about 6, and it really isn't a film for us. It's one of my favorite films now, but back then I fell asleep out of sheer boredom.
Did you fall asleep on it in the theater?
Yeah, I did. I fell asleep in the theater, which is like unbelievably lame. I guess I was just tired. It's amazing the things I could sleep through in the theater, though. But there is something I've noticed about 3D movies, in particular, that tends to make me fall asleep. It's something about the eye strain or something.
Yeah.
These movies are so loud these days. It's so hard to fall asleep. But if a movie's boring enough, it'll do it. But definitely the original, not a boring movie in any way, really.
No.
I think those of you who are not familiar with it should check it out. And check out the uncut version. It's really something else.
It is amazing what they cut.
Although even in its cut version, I still found it a very, very strong movie, and it was still one of my favorites. But yeah, check the uncut one. Although I was reading reviews, a lot of people have problems with the way the film stock degrades slightly whenever an uncut scene is inserted into the the DVD or whatever. It doesn't bother me.
People are so impossible to please, especially horror fans. It's like unbelievable.
Yeah. I saw the Nightbreed Cabal cut on the big screen a year ago, and I mean, I can understand people complaining about that because a lot of the film, the quality is horrendous.
Yeah.
But for the My Bloody Valentine one, to my eyes, it was barely noticeable. Do you know? It is noticeable, but it doesn't disrupt the flow of the movie to me.
I would agree with you. On the DVD, I thought they did a pretty impressive job. Even though there is a slight degradation, it could be much worse.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to my number 2. Here we go.
20th Century Fox invites you to join the boys and girls of Sigma Phi for their annual New Year's Eve party. This year is a masquerade on wheels, and the person behind you could be your best friend or the last person you see on Earth. Experience the most terrifying ride of your life on the Terror Train, rated R.
Starts October 3rd at a selected theater near you.
All right, Terror Train from 1980, released by 20th Century Fox. Plot-wise, it's a New Year's Eve fraternity prank that turns bullied nerd Kenny completely mental, and 3 years later, he boards a train with fraternity members and their ladies, which include Jamie Lee Curtis, and they have a costume party, and the party-loving kids start getting killed off one by one. Terror Train is part of Jamie Lee Curtis's Scream Queen cycle, and it's definitely one of the better ones. Would you guys agree with that?
Oh, 100%, yeah.
It's a snowbound New Year's Eve party on a train. I love the setting. I think movies set on trains in general are pretty cool, and this one uses it to pretty full advantage. They shot, I believe, in Montreal, and it gets pretty snowy up there, so you get the feeling that they're kind of stuck on this train, and when they do get off the train at some point, when things start going wrong, they just can't stay out there. There's nowhere to really go other than the train, so they're forced to be put back on the train with this killer. And the killer, which I don't think is a big spoiler, is Kenny. You kind of get the feeling off the bat that it might be him, but we're not sure in what context he's on the train. He keeps masquerading and using different costumes, and I thought that aspect was really cool. There's the cinematography by John Alcott, which I think is pretty great. He worked on films with Kubrick, and the movie is a step above in terms of quality of films of the time. You could tell there's a pedigree there. Whether it's lighting and atmosphere, the direction by Roger Spottiswoode, who went on to make some movies like Best of Time, Shoot to Kill, Turner and Hooch, and Stop or My Mom Will Shoot. In other words, he made crap basically after that. But he does a good job here, and I just love the atmosphere. I love Jamie Lee in this movie. Although I have to say there are a lot of kids in this movie who have fun costumes. She gets kind of settled with the pretty boring one. I think she's a pirate. which isn't.
And it's like a lame
costumes.
pirate. Like, she did not go all out on that costume. It was a last minute thing.
Yeah.
No. She's a little different than her other characters. She's a bit of a departure from Laurie Strode. She drops the F-bomb. She smokes pot in this one. It's very un-Laurie of her. So she's kind of transitioning a little bit. I can't remember if she did this one before or after Prom Night, but she kind of did them sort of back to back. I love that this movie's, other than a slasher movie, other than a story of Kenny killing people on a train, it's the tender love story between Doc and Mo. The two male leading characters, assumably hetero characters, but their love and their bond is much stronger than anyone else's in this movie. Mo and Alana, the Jamie Lee Curtis character, are constantly on the outs, and there's a scene where Doc kind of comforts Mo and basically tells him that even though if Alana's out of the picture, he's always there for him. He makes it very clear that no matter what, Doc will be there for you, comforting you. And I think it was one of the most sweetest scenes I've seen in a slasher movie between two men, at least.
Even though Doc is a total dick to everybody else.
Exactly. He's such an asshole, but he loves Mo, and when things go wrong later in the film, there's a scene where Doc screams for Mo, and it's a scream I've never heard from another guy in a movie. It's pretty crazy.
And you feel like he would be happier and nicer if he could just have this relationship that he yearns for so much.
That's why he resents Jamie Lee so much. You know?
Yes. Typical Hollywood
Well,
I guess Canadian representation of a woman-hating, repressed homosexual, which, I don't love it, but I do like the sweet male-on-male relationship.
The love triangle in My Bloody Valentine is front and center, but I think the love triangle here is much more powerful in a way.
Yeah, totally.
I like some of the side characters. I like the Mitchie character, played by Sandy Curry. She was also, I believe, in Curtains, another Canadian slasher movie from the early 80s. And I know Ben Johnson gets saddled with being the only adult character, although some of these teenagers or college kids seem pretty old. He gets saddled with some of the boring dialogue, but I think he kind of rises above it. I liked his presence. I thought he was a very pleasant guy to be around, and you could see how he takes a shine to Alana's character, and he sees a bit of maturity and responsibility in her than some of the kids in the movie. There's a really frightening chase scene towards the end, and I think that's one of the best set pieces I've seen in a slasher movie. I think Kenny chasing Alana and her locking herself in the cage was really frightening, though I'm not exactly sure why she breaks out of the cage. Maybe she's afraid he's going to stab her through the cage, but I seem kind of safe. But it's a really well done scene, and for those people out there who are maybe not into slasher movies, I think you should check this out. It's what slasher movies are all about, the suspense, the tension, and that scene does a great job at proving what you can do in a slasher movie. Another thing I like about this movie, David Copperfield as the magician.
Woo, yeah.
It's such a weird thing to add to a movie. He is one of the creepiest guys I've ever seen in a horror movie, and he isn't the killer, although he may be played up a bit as a possible killer. He's totally weird. You could see why it might have been his swan song in film, his first and last role in a film as a character. He just comes across really weird and maybe not someone you would want to hang out with.
Someone you would trust to make you disappear.
Right. His hair is perfectly helmeted.
Totally, yeah. He does some great magic in it, though. I mean, the cigarette through the coin with no cutaways. I mean, yeah, I was kind of astonished. No?
I know when I was a kid, I totally thought that was real, and I'm like, wow, how did he do that? It's pretty amazing.
But no, I'm still wondering how did he do it, because I don't think there is any cutaways, is there?
Yeah, do you know, Meep? Tell us how he did it.
No, there isn't any. I think David Copperfield has gone on record as saying that everything he did in that movie is what he does in real life, and he wanted it to be as realistic as possible with no cuts. And I think he did a great job with the magic. And I'm not someone who's into magic, generally.
The magic show in Terror Train really exemplifies for me one of the things I love about early 80s movies is that they really gave you value for your money. You never just got a slasher film in like the very early 80s. There was either I was like a magic show or a dance off or a musical theater number or you'd always just get multiple forms of entertainment in a slasher movie at that time. And that is something that I really miss. I just had to say that.
Yeah, it's true. Did anyone see the movie earlier this year called Now You See Me?
Oh,
Is that what it was called?
Oh.
Yeah, I saw that. Now it's all about magicians. It's about 4 sort of David Copperfield types, but they use kind of CGI and lots of special effects and cutaways to show them performing their tricks. Whereas, so it doesn't feel like it's magic you're watching. Whereas on Terror Train, I feel it does. It's like you're watching proper magic tricks, even though it is like the cheese-tacular David Copperfield. I was still wowed by a couple of the things he did, I have to say. Okay, I'm on my own, obviously, with that.
I agree.
I thought it was great.
I felt there was no wow factor to Now You See Me, because everything was achieved with visual effects. Whereas with Terror Train, it was all in camera. It was all done there and then.
And I think David Copperfield's cheese-tacularness, as you so aptly put it, is magic all of its own. I love his sparkly outfits and his just kind of aura of early 80s Vegas-ness.
Yes. And one of the great things about Terror Train is, and I mightn't spoil it, so hopefully I won't, but the reveal of how Kenny has been hiding out on the train, which I thought was a spectacular reveal.
So
Again, looking back on the film, it's like, how come I didn't spot that? But I remember being floored the first time I saw Terror Train going, oh my God.
I thought that forever I used to say that Prom Night was my favorite Jamie Lee slasher other than Halloween. But when this Terror Train came out on Blu-ray, the beautiful Blu-ray from Scream Factory, I think this might be my favorite. And that, for me to say that I like any movie more than Prom Night, even if it's only like a slight bit more, that is a gargantuan achievement for Terror Train.
I would think I would for this one Prom Night as well, and I love Prom Night too.
Just because of everything you guys have been saying, it's just jam-packed with innovation and like crazy theatrical innovation, in addition to being suspenseful and romantic and just stylish. It's so great.
Do either of you think, Jamie Lee had it coming for taking part in that prank at the start, or do you feel sorry for her? I feel sorry for her personally because I think she herself was tricked into taking part in the prank.
Yeah, I felt that too.
Mm-hmm.
She was just manipulated by that evil queen.
Yeah, boo to him. Meep, what do you think? Did you feel sorry for Jamie Lee, or did you think she deserved to have revenge hoisted upon her?
Oh no, I totally felt sorry for her. I mean, part of that's her bringing her, I would say baggage as Laurie Strode. You immediately like her, but I think her character, like I said, was duped into it, and you see a genuine sorry in her face.
Yeah,
she's a likable person. Did anyone like the Joy Bouchel?
Yes,
Humongous?
I think she shines in everything she's in. Yeah,
who
I like her.
did she play?
She was wearing those long pants that were kind of attached to her boobs.
Yeah, she's wearing a pair of trousers with a pair of braces. And it was the weirdest costume ever.
Again, my memory is failing me today. It's because I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I don't even remember.
Yeah.
But I'm sure
the character's name is Pet, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, I think her character name is Pet, and her costume is just a pair of men's trousers, but the trousers are so big it actually covers her boobs as well.
That's genius.
It is genius. It's just, but it's bizarre. And she's also the actress in Humongous who gathers berries in her cleavage.
See,
it's all about her boobs.
Yeah.
Jamie Lee should have gone to her for advice on how to come up with a good costume in a short amount of time without much effort.
Exactly.
That's Jamie Lee's biggest crime in the movie. If she deserves vengeance for anything, it's for not, taking the time to show up with a good costume.
I wish Jamie Lee had a good dancing in this movie.
Yeah.
The dancing on the train is terrible.
Yeah, it really
is. The worst dancing.
If you want to see better dancing on a train, can I recommend Night Train to Terror?
Oh, that is great train dance.
Which has break dancing on a train.
Can't beat that.
I have a question for you, and maybe this is too off topic, but what Jamie Lee horror hairdo do you prefer? The Halloween long straight or the Terror Train prom night short curly?
The Terror Train prom night short curly, definitely for me.
I think she was her hottest.
She looks kind of hip,
in
contemporary, and
prom
popular
night.
in those movies.
Yes, that's much more hip. I always personally kind of like the long hair, but it's a lot less iconic.
I think part of why she cut her hair is kind of the longish hair kind of makes her face look thinner. She has a very thin face as it is, and it kind of frames her face in a certain way that maybe is not as flattering. Not always flattering at certain angles, at least. And I like that she cut her hair.
Cut her hair short for like shredding places. And
yeah.
Perfect. And yeah.
Is that it for Terror
Train? Sorry, my thing is dropping out a lot.
Your thing is dropping out a lot.
My thing is dropping out. What am I going to do?
Pull your trousers up.
Trousers? What? All right. So let's move on to our number ones.
Christmas. If this movie doesn't make your skin crawl, it's on too tight.
Rated R.
That movie has some of the creepiest Christmas music ever, which is one of the reasons that I love it. That's actually another strength of Silent Night, Deadly Night, too. We were talking about how that's not our favorite slasher movie, but that has some really nasty Christmas music. But I don't know, Black Christmas, it might win, because it doesn't even write new creepy Christmas songs. It just uses the original and makes them very haunting. This might be in my imagination, but I feel like in the last 15 years or so, Black Christmas has really become this well-known entity. Whereas when I first discovered it, I feel like it was sort of thought of as this hidden gem because it hadn't been had been released on video in the early 80s, but it hadn't been. I mean, there was no DVDs, and it had, I think, maybe just gotten released on Laserdisc for the first time, and not many people had seen it. But now it feels like almost like a cliche holiday movie, which I'm happy about. I think that it's good that everybody sings its praises. It's definitely one of the creepiest for me. One of the creepiest. I guess it's really a proto-slasher film, but one of the creepiest proto or non-proto slasher films ever made, and one of the creepiest holiday movies. If you haven't seen it, it's about a group of sorority sisters who are being terrorized by the most scary, obscene phone caller ever on Christmas Eve, I think it starts, during their Christmas celebrations. And it's revealed at the very beginning that the killer is in the house, but they don't know it. And so while they're being stalked by this scary killer and eventually people start to die, the sorority sisters are also dealing with their personal problems. Barb, played by the absolutely indomitable Margot Kidder, is dealing with her gold-plated slut of a mother who doesn't want her to come home for Christmas. Olivia Hussey plays I forget her name in the character, but she's sort of the lead, most beautiful sorority sister, and she's dealing with an unwanted pregnancy and a tortured artist boyfriend. Andrea Martin, the great Andrea Martin, plays Phyllis, who's just kind of supportive and smart and funny and cute and lovable. And then there's the house mother, who's also fabulous. Another former vaudeville star who's constantly looking for one of her hidden bottles of booze. So there's a lot of great character development in this movie, in addition to a lot of great funny dialogue, in addition to some real creepy ass atmosphere. And if Eric, you complained about the lack of holiday atmosphere in Home for the Holidays, Black Christmas is just dripping with it. Everywhere you look, there's some great holiday decoration or a wonderful like snowy vista, and man, it's so terrific. And the other reason I love this movie is because it's Art Hindle plays one of the boyfriends, and he's one of my all-time horror movie crushes. And I've said this before many times, but I love that he wears a fur coat in this movie and makes it look totally masculine. And I'm just like, man, I wish I could make a fur coat look so masculine if I wore it, but I would not succeed at that. So I adore this movie. I watch it every year. I never get sick of it, and I always find something something new to love.
I would agree it is dripping in Christmas atmosphere, and part of its Christmas appeal to me is that the first time I ever saw it was on Christmas on television, because as you said, it was certainly over here. It was difficult to track down on VHS. I certainly never saw it in my local video shop, so it was TV screenings I relied on, and I do think it is utterly brilliant. It's one of the creepiest slasher movies, because as much as I love slasher movies, the bulk of them aren't scary. A lot of them are fun, but very few of them are actually genuinely frightening, and Black Christmas is one that is, from the creepy sort of point of view stuff, especially where at the start the killer is climbing up the trellis to get into the attic window. That's extraordinarily creepy. And then, of course, there's the standout scene where Jess sees just an eyeball staring back at her through a crack in the door.
Yeah.
That's absolutely terrifying. And I love the ambiguity of the ending as well. And it's just such an eerie film, but also thrilling as well. Not terribly gory, but certainly it implies a lot of sort of nasty violence. And the killer, it definitely is not somebody you'd want to mess with from the sounds of it. I'm surprised at the level of profanity in the movie. I didn't think the C word was even invented back in 1974, but obviously I'm wrong. God, the C word is generally considered the strongest of all swear words, and it's used at least a dozen times in this film. I also excuse me. Yeah, I agree that I love the character Margot Kidder plays. Again, to plug my own podcast, we discussed Black Christmas on the Hysteria Continues. I think we all agreed that she's one of the most likable, quote, bitch characters in a slasher movie. Even though she's not a bitch, she's probably more of a smart aleck. But you can tell the reason that she kind of sort of bites back at people is because she has her own sort of traumas. It's implied she has these family problems going on. And that makes her kind of sympathetic. And I certainly did not want to see any of the characters killed in this movie. I thought they were all pretty darn likable. And actually another scene that I think stands out as being scary, and it's quite innocuous, is where the Andrew Martin character goes in to check up on Margot Kidder. And you can just see her face as she realizes there's somebody hiding behind the door. And that's all there is to the scene. But I found that kind of chilling, I have to say. Yeah.
Yeah. I think looking back at the list of movies we've done so far, it's up there with Jaws as the best directed holiday horror movies. So well done by Bob Clark. Love all those split diopter shots. And, I'm going to just call it and say it's the second best directed slasher movie after John Carpenter's Halloween. From the atmosphere to the actors, just that feeling of dread that permeates throughout the whole film.
There's some enjoyable, humorous moments as well. Obviously, probably all involving Margot Kidder, where she gives the false telephone number.
Yes.
To the police sergeant. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's listen to that one. I have a clip of it here already.
Could you give me the number at the sorority house? Please.
Yeah, sure. It's Fellatio 20880. Fellatio. It's a new exchange. FE.
It's a new one on me. How do you spell it?
Capital F E little L LATIO.
Thanks.
Don't to mention.
I love Margaret Kidder so much, and I don't know that I ever loved her more than in this movie.
Yeah, always been a big fan of hers, and she's great in this movie. I love that she's constantly drunk.
Yeah,
she's always drinking. I think she even drinks at the police station.
Yeah. She takes a beer out of her purse and opens it. Not just even like taking a flask would be one thing, but she takes out like a 40. I think that's so badass. I just think that's the best. And she gives alcohol to children, which is cool too.
Oh yeah.
One of the things I just really love about this movie too is that it really kind of, I feel watching this movie like I know what it was like to be in a sorority in Canada on Christmas in 1974. And that's something that I really want to know what it was like. I would be happy to watch many more movies on that subject.
I think what Bob Clark also does, besides the adding so much tension and atmosphere, he allows there to be a lot of humor, and it's throughout the film. You know, it's clearly a running theme of his work. He wanted to make Porky's, and he does a great job at creating these characters who are funny. And these girls are really ballsy, and you don't see that in sorority movies. Sorority horror movies, at least.
Yeah, they're not your stereotypical sorority sisters at all. They're all kind of brainy.
Yes. You actually are convinced
really
they actually pass exams, which is unusual for these type of films.
I like that there's the prerequisite character who leaves the story early and then dies. That was kind of set up in Home for the Holidays, and it's done well here. She's sitting up in the attic. I love all those shots of her just in the chair with the plastic over her. It's pretty creepy. And like you said, the winter setting it's used really well, and the Christmas lights, they're so beautiful. Like all the reds.
Yeah. I was admiring the wreath with the big red bulbs. It's used so nicely with framing Olivia Hussey's face when she's watching the kids. And I usually think big Christmas bulbs are a little bit tacky, but I was like, ooh, maybe there it's really elegant and magical.
And there's a reason why this movie's so influential. Halloween, House on Sorority Row, countless movies.
When a Stranger Calls.
They owe a big debt to Black Christmas.
Certainly do.
Any trivia or anything you want to add, guys?
Oh, well, I'll add one interesting tidbit. I meant to say this before. I was talking about that book, Blood Money, which one of its main arguments is about how the 70s and 80s slasher films were partially or even largely geared towards a female audience. And one of the things he points out, he has a whole great chapter on Black Christmas, how it was marketed and what went into the production. And he argues that actually, as much as it was maybe inspired by, people always think slasher movies were inspired by Psycho or I don't know, Blood and Black Lace, and there are those elements there. It was equally inspired by the success of 70s college chick flicks like Love Story and The Way We Were. And I thought that was so interesting. And it is kind of true. It has that look. And Andrea Martin sort of has Barbra Streisand's hair from The Way We Were, and Olivia Hussey has Ali MacGraw's hair from Love Story. So I was like, maybe there's something to that argument. And so I just thought that's fascinating. I never think of slasher films involving elements of traditional, quote, women's genres. But right before Black Christmas went into production, those movies were the big movies. So it kind of makes sense. I thought that was interesting.
Speaking of hair, that Andrea Martin's... Is it her boyfriend? The guy with the afro?
Some crazy ass hair.
Eric?
What?
Do you
No, I
him?
never had a crazy afro, if that's what you're insinuating.
I did.
I did sport a mullet once.
How about you, Ben? Have you ever had a mullet?
No, never a mullet. But I have had many crazy afros, and I still could at any time, any day. I would be if I tried to grow a mullet, I'd look like Shirley Temple. It would not be pretty.
It's quite an image.
Quite an image, yes.
Trivia-wise, this was Black Christmas was a favorite of Steve Martin's, apparently.
Huh.
I think this was mentioned on your podcast, Eric.
Yes, we probably did, yeah, because didn't he meet Olivia Hussey at some premiere and he was telling her how much he loved Black Christmas?
Right, and she had automatically thought it was for Romeo and Juliet, the role
Yeah.
she's most associated with. And apparently he had watched Black Christmas like 20 times. I was a huge fan.
I love that.
Who would have thought?
I'm wondering as well if John Waters, John Waters was a fan, because the obscene phone calls are certainly a huge part of Serial Mom.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's right.
And there are a lot of resonances between the
Yes.
tones of them, yeah.
Yeah, because I know that John Waters is a big fan of Christmas Eve, which came out 6 years later. So I imagine he'd probably into all kind of Christmassy, trashy, sleazy, horror-y type things.
It would make sense.
Yes.
Another interesting bit of trivia was that the title was briefly changed to Silent Night Evil Night because they didn't want to confuse it for a blaxploitation movie, which was super popular at the time. But I think they decided to go with Black Christmas eventually.
I could understand their sort of concerns, because there was Blackula and what was the Frankenstein one just called Black Frankenstein? Or was it called
Blackenstein?
Yeah. Yeah, so they probably were worried that
This was the Black White Christmas.
Yeah, or something like
Right.
that.
Black Godfather. There were so many. Anything else for Black Christmas?
Nope. That's
I suppose we just mentioned the remake. What did you guys think? Again, it seems to divide people. I thought it was okay. I didn't think it was offensive, or I didn't think it was awful, as a lot of people seem to think.
I saw it in the theater, and I have not seen it since then. But I remember when I saw it that I really actually liked it, and I thought that it was among the more fun, entertaining remakes that I'd seen. You know, nothing can hold a candle to the original, and I would never even ask anything to try. But I thought I really liked it. I'd actually like to see it again. It's been a long time.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen it as well, but I do remember enjoying it. Again, like you say, it doesn't hold a candle to the original, and I don't think it doesn't really have a lot of plot elements in common as far as I remember. So it's just more like taking the Christmas setting and, you know, taking it in their own direction. But I remember it being kind of fun and quite gory.
Yes, I just remember something with Christmas cookies being made out of the skin on somebody's back and being like, ooh, that's pretty nasty, but that's kind of cool at the same time. Did you see it, Meep?
I did.
And?
If you have nothing nice to say, don't say it at all.
Oh, dear.
I have absolutely nothing nice to say about that movie. Just wasn't for me.
Let's move on then.
That's all I'm going to say. All right, moving on to Eric's number one. Here it is.
First, there was Halloween. Then the terror continued with Halloween 2. Now, Halloween 3. The night no one comes home.
The world's going to change tonight, Doctor.
Halloween 3, Season of the Witch.
Happy Halloween.
Rated R. Starts Friday at a theater near you. Check newspapers.
Yes, my number one is Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, which is the story which isn't a continuation of Halloween 1 and 2. Instead, it goes off in its own thread about an evil toy maker who plans to blend technology with ancient Celtic witchcraft to create this mass human sacrifice on Halloween night. So it's a very Twilight Zone type premise. It's very outlandish, and it certainly doesn't hold up to much scrutiny if you start analysing sort of the various plot points in the movie. Now, like a lot of people, I was caught out in the 80s by this, thinking it was going to be a direct sequel to Halloween 2. I was expecting Michael Myers, because this was the 80s, pre-internet. I wasn't reading Fangoria at the time. I was literally just going into video shops, and I obviously didn't read the sleeve of Halloween 3's box, because I'm sure it must have told me that it wasn't going to be a regular sequel. So to add insult to injury, Halloween 3 was released over here on VHS with 2 minutes and 6 seconds of censorship cuts. So basically every effect sequence except for the main centerpiece test room scene, everything bar that was gone. You know, all effects were gone. So the film was very, very tame, didn't make a lot of sense. It had no Michael Myers, so I felt really, really let down by it. A couple of years later, it showed up on television on the BBC in a much more complete version, still not fully uncut, but it had some of the effect sequences, back in. The film made a lot more sense. It had a lot more impact, and that's the sort of start of my love affair with Season of the Witch. I just love the fact, and you have to admire, even if you don't like the film, the fact that they were willing to go out on such a limb by creating such a drastically different type of film. Even though I think it still has this sort of John Carpenter Halloween vibe about it. Even if the plot, that's the thing. The plot is just so outrageous. It's totally unlike anything that would get made today. I feel. I remember watching it for the first time and just, even though I wasn't really enjoying it, I was kind of drawn in by the mystery of what the hell is going on, and it just doesn't reveal its sort of true nature until I suppose it's over an hour into the film, and that, as I said, the centerpiece sequence with the test room and the Kupner family, and that scene still I find kind of disturbing to this day, mainly because it involves lots and lots of bugs and insects and, my Achilles heel, snakes. Thankfully, I live in Ireland, which has no snakes, but and I know over in the States, it's just snakes everywhere. I mean, if you're going down to the delicatessen, you probably have to sidestep about 15 rattlesnakes to get into the shop. That's the kind of impression I get anyway of the States. But I hate snakes, and you put snake into any film, no matter how silly it is, and it'll move from being silly to disturbing to me. I like sort of there is no apocalyptic feel, no matter how silly to the film. I feel, and that I think is kind of suspenseful. I think Dan O'Herlihy is a wonderfully evil genius. He's a bit one-dimensional, but he's suitably evil, and I can imagine him coming up with such a fiendish plot, and also the fact that they've hired an Irish actor to play an Irish evil genius was kind of nice. He provides us with an authentic Irish accent, unlike Mr. Rafferty, who runs the Rose of Shannon Motel, who has the most phony Irish accent. I'm not sure who the actor is, but I'm assuming he wasn't Irish, because nobody in Ireland speaks like that. He has that same Irish accent that Tom Cruise thinks Irish people have when he went and did Far and Away with Ron Howard. The film, yeah, I just think it's just so outlandish, and it's so unlike anything else I'd ever seen, and it's certainly, when you consider it's the third entry in a highly profitable franchise, it's just such an unexpected treat. And one of the things that surprises me actually is that at the time of its release, Deborah Hill, the producer, was sort of going around waving this banner saying, "Yeah, we've made a really suspenseful horror film that's not gory at all," whereas in fact it's incredibly gory. The film opens with a guy getting his skull pulled apart, another guy gets his head ripped off, and then of course you have the mask scene where a child's head is turned into bugs and snakes and insects and things. I think it's the goriest of all the Halloween films, if you ask me. I don't know what Deborah Hill was on about, but certainly the gore is a big selling point to me, I have to say. So as I said, in 1982, I can understand people going into the cinema and being tricked into thinking they were going to see Michael Myers. I certainly was when I got it on video. But it's certainly, when you look back on things like Halloween 4, which I think is probably one of the worst entries in the series, I think it stands up as being one of the stronger ones. I don't think it's as good as the first two, but I think it's the best after that. And then, of course, all the subsequent Michael Myers sequels just get progressively more and more boring. And don't get me started on the remakes. Oh, somebody doing some DIY?
Sorry, yeah, somebody's in here fixing our door. Is that going to be a problem?
No, it's fine.
Just as long as you're okay. I thought it might have been
crazy
killer
baby in the
robots
background, too.
coming to
Snowplows.
rip your head open.
No, I'm all right.
I was going to ask you, what did you think of the Robot-tacular Halloween 3?
I was
totally
traumatized.
It's with tons of robots.
I love robots. I actually have a fear of robots. Not really a big fear, but they did kind of creep me out a little bit. But like you, I was totally traumatized by that pumpkin head melting scene with the bugs and the snake. I have a total bug phobia, likely stemming from watching this movie in 1982 in a movie theater. It just freaked me out. And thank you, Halloween 3.
You saw this when it
Yes.
originally came out, did you? Do you know going in that it was not a Michael Myers film?
I don't remember. All I know is it was Halloween, and I wanted to see it. I wanted to see anything Halloween related.
What did you think
And,
when you saw, at that moment of freshness?
I was just along for the ride. It wasn't like Michael Myers wasn't a big thing for me then. I was pretty young, and I just knew I was into horror movies, and this movie creeped me out. Especially the stuff with the bugs and the idea of kids being killed on such a mass level because some crazy Irish dude just didn't like them, wanted to take over the world.
That sounds like you're talking about me.
Eric,
Are you
it's
not
no
a fan?
coincidence you don't like snakes, and you're from Ireland, and this movie has a big Ireland theme. I think you are a robot.
I saw this on the big screen last year. It looked terrific. And I watched it with a sort of a semi-drunken Irish audience, and we all love all the sort of Irish references. Like they pass a bar called the Dublin Inn, and then Rafferty opens his mouth. He's all like, "Tura Lura, top of the morning to you, Rose of Shannon Motel," and that gets big laughs as well.
I know when I went to Ireland for a honeymoon, it wasn't anything like that with the accents. I was very disappointed. People either spoke kind of like you, with not much of an accent, or they were the ones who just refused to speak English and spoke Gaelic.
What? Were you out in the remotest villages in the west of Ireland?
Yes.
Because
we took a road
I
trip.
can tell you that about
we went from the west coast all the way to the other side.
There's only the tiniest minority of people would speak Irish as their primary language.
Yeah, I seemed to bump into them. It was interesting. This movie's very themed.
Want to make your head melt.
Yeah.
This movie's very themed as Halloween. You can't get any more Halloween than this movie, probably. I like to see someone try.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. I even though I think of the original Halloween as a great movie that captures the tone and feel of Halloween so well, for me, maybe because I was a child in the 80s when everything was so commodified, Halloween 3 really feels like Halloween to me. Like, that's the Halloween that I remember. It might also be because Halloween 3 was, for some reason, on TV around Halloween a lot more than Halloween 1 and 2 tended to.
Yeah, same for me, yeah.
I don't know what that was all about. But that montage where they're going all around the world showing the kids preparing, there could have been footage of me and my friends in that montage, which I love about so much. I also saw this movie probably in the 80s, maybe the early 90s on videotape. And I knew it wasn't a Michael Myers movie, so I wasn't expecting that. I don't know how I knew, probably from reading the back cover. And I didn't, I want to tell you, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that the guy would be banging on the door like this so much. Is this going to screw up the whole podcast?
No, I'm glad somebody's
fine
banging.
Okay, so I'll go back to what I was saying.
Someone's getting something.
Yeah, I saw this in the 80s or early 90s and rented it on VHS, and I did not despise it like I remember a lot of people did who I would speak to. Oh, that's terrible. There's no Michael Myers. I was underwhelmed. But at the time, I totally adore it now. But I think that one of the reasons for that, looking back, is that this movie really suffered on videotape. It really, really suffered from the pan and scan. I think even more than the original Halloween did. It's such a gorgeous, gorgeous movie, and it's so much about the atmosphere. And I totally agree with you that it very much captures the sort of John Carpenter tone and feel of the first two movies in a lot of ways. And you really lost that on video. So I've since seen it many times, and it's one of my favorite movies, one of my favorite horror movies. I just could watch it constantly. I was lucky enough to see it on the big screen. Maybe I think it was last year too. On one of the last 35mm prints they ever showed in Los Angeles, and it was it was such and with an audience that obviously loved it, and it was so very exciting. It was really ahead of its time because you see, the American Horror Story now doing so well, basically doing the same thing that they wanted to do. year coming up with this new horror story. I guess American Horror Story is not related to Halloween exactly, but it happens every Halloween. So I think...
And this current season is all about the witches, right? So,
yeah.
See, it's the season of the witch.
Yeah, exactly. I think Halloween 3 totally could have been a season of American Horror Story, but it's much... I'm disappointed by the show this season. Halloween 3 is much better than the current season of The Witch. But
have any of you seen the Scream Factory Blu-ray release?
Yeah.
Yes. I love it.
It was the whole reason I bought a multi-region Blu-ray player was because Scream Factory were going to be bringing out Halloween 2 and 3, but they were going to be region locked. But I'm so glad I did. Halloween 3 in particular is just because there are two films I was waiting for so long to get, some kind of special edition treatment, and they really knocked it out of the park with it. Two commentaries, featurettes. I love the Sean Clark. What's the word? Horrors Hallowed Grounds.
Horrors.
Is that the word?
Yes, that's it.
Haunts, which I think is great fun to watch. So I mean, you were saying how ill-treated it was in a pan and scan version on VHS, and also over here we had it, of course, trimmed of 2 minutes. So it was just a delight to finally get a pristine widescreen Blu-ray of it. It's just absolutely spectacular. And I mean, if you're a fan of the film, I mean, I 100% urge you to go out and get it. I think it's probably my favorite Scream Factory release.
They
really
put
so much love into their stuff,
which is a cliche, but it feels like that.
It does, completely.
Mm-hmm. Terror Train was also on release from Scream Factory, and the print on that is amazing.
It is. So I'd never actually owned any kind of copy of Terror Train up until that point. I bought the Scream Factory one.
I know, it's like you see with new eyes because it looks so good. This movie, Halloween 3, was... You would have thought it was made with many, many millions of dollars because it just has such a prestigious quality about it. It's so top notch in the cinematography and the music. Everyone was on their game and did such a great job. Probably why it still holds up 30 years later.
Although I was reading some reviews of it, and some people are being sniffy about how crap some of the sets were, and they were saying, how on earth does Conal Cochran plan to take over the world when all he has as his base operation is 6 computers and a card table?
I never thought about that.
No, I never thought about that either, but yeah.
I thought he was just going from
that's nitpicking.
That is nitpicking, I think, because I think it does look pretty darn good. I mean, there's that optical effect where Dan O'Herlihy's character meets his demise. That's kind of weird. It looks awfully... It just looks bizarrely cheap and idiotic. I don't know what it's meant to be, if you know what I mean.
What moment are you talking about?
Where Conal Cochran evaporates, for want of a better word.
Yeah. In the early 80s, they always seemed to do that with villains. They would make them evaporate in like some kind of weird, sparkly haze of dust, and it just was never... I mean, like Nightmare on Elm Street also, just not scary at all, but I love it. Both of them.
It's the power of Stonehenge.
I just remembered, I actually have a kind of good childhood trauma story about Halloween 3. When I was very, very, very young, before I'd seen any of the Halloween movies, my family and I were sitting around TV flipping the channels, and we flipped to the scene where the woman in the hotel room gets the laser in her mouth and then just becomes, a disaster. And then my parents changed it. And I was like, what was that? And I made them look it up, and they were like, Halloween 3. And I was like, holy shit, that was so scary. I went to bed being scared, thinking of that image over and over and over again.
Did you get to see the aftermath of the effect of it, or just the laser hitting her in the face?
No, I think I just saw the laser hitting her in the face, which was scary enough when I was 4 or 5 or whatever. So the aftermath would have really blown my mind. I don't remember if they showed that on TV in the day.
Yeah, the aftermath bit is really freaky. It's the second freakiest element of the film. It's just so bizarre and makes my skin crawl.
Yeah. Oh god, I just want to go after this podcast. Go watch Halloween 3. Just talking about it makes me so happy.
Before we move on, can I just say I love Tom Atkins?
I'm so glad you brought
that
awesome
up. In this movie.
To me,
he's
Tom
such a
Atkins
ladies' man.
is like the great romantic lead of horror movies.
He's got a very pert set of buttocks as well.
Yes. And he gets
I
played
love
the
how
best performance in this movie. He's the rugged alcoholic cute-butted doctor. It's a rich characterization.
he picks
And he
up
gets
with
to
that
shag Stacey
Stacey
Nelkin.
Nelkin character really quickly. He's got a game.
He specializes in that too. It's like in The Fog. Like he just sees a woman and they see him, and it's just like bang.
Yeah, their clothes fall off.
Literally.
Yeah. But you'd think that Stacey Nelkin's character would have a lot more on her mind rather than jumping into bed with Tom Atkins. That obviously
She's coping.
Sexual,
She's coping.
Yeah. Oh, that's
Totally coping.
That's how we cope. We bang.
Oh, right. Yeah. True. I never
But not
thought about
in
it that way.
Ben's apartment. That's someone else.
Wait, what did you say?
Moving on.
Yeah, I missed the joke. I'm totally over my head.
Moving on to number one. My number one. I kind of cheated in this one. There will be two movies, but I love them so much, so I had to pick both of them. Here's the first one.
Paramount Pictures cordially invites you to the party to end all parties.
April Fool. You are such a jerk. Is something wrong?
April Fool's Day. Get ready to party till you drop. Rated R.
Starts Thursday, March 27th at a theater near you.
Yeah, that trailer doesn't really give away a lot, but it's basically a group of college friends who are invited by their friend Muffy to spend the weekend of April Fool's partying at her island mansion. And it's all laughs, booze, and practical jokes until Muffy's friends start dying off one by one, leaving a mystery to be solved by those left standing. That's if whoever's responsible for the murders doesn't get to them first. So April Fool's Day was released in 86 for April Fool's that weekend. I went in going, like everyone else, thinking it was a straight-up horror movie, straight-up slasher movie. It was released by Paramount, and it had Frank Mancuso Jr. as a producer, so it promised a Friday the 13th pedigree. And while it lives up to that, to some degree, it's also very much a comedy, and I love comedies as well as I do slasher movies, so the joining of the two I thought was a lot of fun. And I love this movie for many, many reasons, but I'll be brief since I'm covering two movies. I love the anamorphic widescreen cinematography by, I think it was Charles Minsky, whose most high-profile work to date is Pretty Woman, a movie that is very different from slasher movies of the 80s.
Oh, yes.
But I love it as well, for different reasons. It's really atmospheric. It's really well shot. It's directed by Fred Walton, who did When a Stranger Calls and the sequel When a Stranger Calls Back, and he gives the movie, like I mentioned in a previous film, like a prestige. There's a shine to this movie. I wouldn't just go as far as saying it's glossy, because I feel like the atmosphere in the movie is very authentic. I think it was shot in Vancouver or British Columbia, and it's just really well put together. The music by Charles Bernstein, his score. He did Nightmare on Elm Street and The Entity and Deadly Friend, three scores I like a lot. There's a lot of effort put into this film that may go unnoticed because it is a silly movie and also a slasher movie in a way. I like the actors a lot. I think they're really all engaging. I think Deborah Foreman of Valley Girl, which is one of my favorite films, does a good job as Muffy, and possibly her twin sister Buffy, who starts going on a killing spree. And she has a great job, and everyone else in the film does a good job of portraying college kids who know each other. A couple of them aren't as close as friends, but they're all connected by Muffy. A couple of the actors from one of my favorite movies, just one of the guys, there's another thing I'll probably mention every podcast, Clayton Rohner and Deborah Goodrich put in a good turn as girlfriend and boyfriend here. He had lusted after her in Just One of the Guys, and now he gets her as a full-on girlfriend. And obviously Amy Steele from Friday the 13th Part 2 plays the final girl here, and I like her a lot. I mean, she's not the Ginny of Friday the 13th Part 2, but she does a good job. She's immediately likable. She's given the worst outfits I've ever seen in a final girl. she's basically wearing long shirts and ties and things that are really unflattering. But she's a very pretty woman. In the scene where she strips down, she has a great body. But for some reason, the costumer decided that she should look like a man, which I think is really strange.
Maybe the Annie Hall look, to be diplomatic.
Yeah, it is a bit Annie Hall, but it's not as refined.
Yeah.
It's a lot of baggy clothes, which is really strange. I love the island setting. I'm big on movies that are set in an island. I think islands in general are pretty atmospheric, and that's what really adds to the film. It kind of takes the look of Friday the 13th a bit and kind of pushes it. I would like the idea of Friday the 13th on an island. That'd be kind of cool. Although, I guess, technically, should be on a lake.
An island in the middle of a lake.
Yes. We could do whatever we want in our minds. Ben, Eric, how do you feel about this film?
I love April Fool's Day, and oddly, for a slasher film, my favourite moments in the film are nothing to do with the quote horror elements of it. My favourite character in it is Nikki, played by Deborah Goodrich, you were mentioning there. I love the opening shot of her being filmed, and she's acting all prissy and telling the camera that she's planning to go to a convent, her best friends are her parents, and then she sort of breaks the facade by saying, "And I fuck on the first date." I love that scene, and I love later where she is doing the sex survey in the magazine with Amy Steele and one of the other characters. I just think that the interaction between the characters is just great fun. They're all really likable, even though they're all more or less typical slasher movie characters. It reaches a point for me where, I say to myself, I don't care if this doesn't, drift off into horror territory. I'm just having a good time watching these characters interacting, and it's fun, it's entertaining and engaging. As a slasher movie, I didn't like it that much when I saw it first in the 80s. I don't want to give any spoilers, but it does the same thing with the ending that a film like Critters did, where it kind of pulls the rug out from under you, which I didn't. But looking back at it now, I just think the film, just from start to finish, is really, really entertaining, and I don't care that it can be called a cheat of a movie, but I really like it. As you said, I love the costume that Amy Steele is given. I know you're saying it's unflattering, but I think it's very, very. It was a very 80s thing, wasn't it, for women to wear sort of a man's shirt? Do I remember Madison in Splash wearing men's clothes as well? I thought it was kind of trendy in the 80s, no?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she wore men's clothes until she went on our shopping montage
and became a woman, thank
sexy
God.
ladies' clothes.
Amy Steele needs a shopping montage where she conforms. And who better to film it than the cinematographer of Pretty Woman?
Totally.
Yeah, exactly. I do love, there's I don't know how spoilery we're going to be, but there's a bit at the end where her Amy Steele's boyfriend is screaming constantly. That always makes me chuckle. I don't want to spoil it, but when you see it, you'll know what I mean.
It's so awkward.
Oh God, I just love when men
awkward,
scream
yeah.
in movies. It always makes me so happy, and it's so rare.
Ben, any other thoughts on the film?
You guys have said almost everything that I could say. I'm so glad you pointed out the scene where they're taking the sex quiz, because that's my favorite. Although, doesn't it end where they ask a question and you don't hear the answers the second time around? That was really... I might be wrong about that, but I just remember always wanting it to go on longer than it does. Like, I want them to take the whole test and for me to get to watch it. But
it cuts to a scene of a hot dog. So
yeah,
it's being pretty phallic, which
stylish.
is
Montage editing at its most tasteful. I'm glad you pointed out the anamorphic cinematography. It's very rare that you see a slasher film shot with such a wide screen. I think Friday the 13th Part 3 is the only one I can think of, and that's not nearly as well done as... I mean, I love it, but it's not nearly as beautifully photographed as April Fool's Day. I think Deborah Foreman should have won an Academy Award for this performance. This creating potentially two such vivid characters as Muffy and Buffy. And she was so fearless in making herself so dowdy in the Buffy role. The only flaw with this movie, and it's so cliche to complain about this, and I complain about it all the time, is that I'm so upset that Deborah Foreman never ties her hair into a noose like she does on the poster. And she never wears that dress either.
I was always confused by that poster because she's in the shot, but she's also in the foreground with the hair and the noose. It's weird. It's two of her, but I guess that's the idea, right?
Oh, I never noticed that she's actually in it. Yeah, that's funny. It's the grand 80s tradition of having horror movie posters with characters that aren't actually in the film, like Nightmare on Elm Street 3, where the lady in the foreground actually is wearing a very similar outfit.
Oh, really?
Or Evil Dead poster, where there's a lady not even in the film on the poster.
Yes, exactly.
And that happened to Deborah a lot. Like the poster for Valley Girl, that's a different girl.
Totally.
Oh.
I was always so annoyed by that. Why doesn't Deborah Foreman get to be on posters?
I don't know, but I want to take it up with the people in charge and slap them silly.
I do think Muffy's little the little trinkets she leaves in all the people's bedrooms are a bit cruel at times. Like she leaves a tape recording of a crying baby for the character who's had an abortion.
Yes,
or who lost a baby or something like that happened to her, and then she leaves the drugs paraphernalia kit in Arch's bathroom, obviously indicating he was a junkie at one stage or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know that Muffy is somebody who I'd really want to be close friends with. There's definitely a sociopathic edge to her.
Definitely.
I like that the girls have a rivalry with her, like the Deborah Gorich character.
Yeah.
She warns her not to steal her current boyfriend Chaz, and the Nan character totally gets upstaged by her. I think the only one that doesn't have a problem with her is Amy Steele.
Can I just ask about the very last scene in April Fool's Day, where there's a prank played on Muffy? Is that character Nan? Because I can never work out who it is.
Yeah, it's Nan.
It is Nan. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd be one of those people who wouldn't be able to tell the difference between He-Man and Prince Adam. I say I'm really bad. All she does is tie her hair back a bit, and suddenly I don't know who she is. Yeah.
Did you read the novelization of April Fool's Day? I hear that the end is totally different in the book.
Mm-hmm. They
Yes,
also shot
rings a bell.
that scene.
What happened?
It turns out that the killer is, as it plays out in the movie, but then there's an extended ending where a character in the movie comes back and gives Muffy a big surprise.
Okay.
Then something happens to that person and it becomes real. I don't want to completely spoil it.
Sure, not a problem. I'll have to pick it up and read it on my own.
It's a good read. Some of the characters are changed in the book, which is they're the same characters, but the tone gets a little more. They're a little meaner, maybe. Just a little weird. I love the characters in this movie, and I think it's a lot of fun.
When I watched this film first, I thought the twist at the end kind of spoiled it for me. Whereas now, I find that the twist. I find it more fun to watch knowing the twist, if it's what I'm trying to say. Whereas with films that have such a strong twist at the end, normally you can only watch them once and that's it. Kind of like an M. Night Shyamalan movie. But with April Fool's Day, knowing what twist is coming, I think it makes the film more enjoyable to watch, if that makes any sense.
Oh, totally. I feel like I never want the characters in my favorite slasher movies to die. I'd be much happier if they never did. So it's like the dream slasher where nobody dies. But I just wish none of them had been out of the movie for even the period of time that they were. I wish that it had just been like 20 hours, like you said, of this party.
Yeah.
Speaking of parties, here's my other pick.
There are few simple pleasures that can compare with curling up in bed with a nice big book.
Yes. Just stop it. Just be quiet.
Jennifer Beattie. How are you, Jennifer? I was telling the rest of the class about what a pleasure deep reading can be. Have you, Jennifer, ever curled up in bed with a nice big book?
I myself prefer a big fat cucumber.
My co-pick, another April Fool's movie called Killer Party. It's from 1986, though I think it was shot in 1984, and it kind of feels like it. It's a fun movie. It's about three girls named Jennifer, Phoebe, and prankster Vivia. And there are three friends who decide to pledge a sorority. And when one of the Vivias, I think it is, her elaborate pranks makes a bit of a splash, the three girls get into the sorority. but also find themselves having to set up a prank at the traditional April Fool's Day party that's the sorority and fraternity holds. The party this year is it's at a creepy abandoned frat house, which has someone named Alan who had died 22 years prior, and the party gets underway and things start going wrong very quickly. Bodies pile up and one of the girls is not feeling quite like herself, and it becomes a party that no one's ever going to forget. So like April Fool's Day, it's another silly horror comedy hybrid, and this one goes to pretty dark places towards the end. You could definitely feel the movie was influenced heavily by the success of Porky's. There's a scene early on where that kind of comes out of nowhere where girls in a hot tub are being attacked by bees. It's almost like the prerequisite 80s hot tub scene, which were prevalent in so many movies at the time, and it's kind of thrown in there to make it more of a Porky's kind of movie, and it's fine. It kind of sets off the sorority fraternity hijinks of the movie. That's fun. I neglected to mention that the movie begins with a movie within a movie within a music video, which is a first I don't think has been since matched. It's a very Canadian
Scream 4.
movie. It has... I'm sorry?
Scream 4 does the same thing and probably takes it even further.
That's
no
right.
music video though in Scream 4.
No, there's no music video, but there's a film within a film within a film within a film, I think, at the start of Scream 4.
And it's a lot of fun. I wonder if they were kind of referencing this movie when they did that, since they always seem to reference slasher movies from the 80s. It's Canadian. It feels Canadian. It has that gothic university vibe that's prevalent in a lot of Canadian shot horror movies from that period up until and through, like movies like Urban Legend, which was also shot out there. The actors themselves are very engaging. I especially like Sherry Willis Birch as Vivia. Final Exam, I think, is her only other credit, which is kind of sad because she's a very engaging presence in film. She's the nerdy girl.
Is she the girl? Yeah, she's the girl with the glasses, is it?
Yeah, I love her big glasses.
Yeah, more big glasses.
And her big curly hair. She's cute. Martin Hewitt of Endless Love shows up as one of the girl's boyfriends, and I'm not sure what has happened to him, but he was kind of big at the time, and then he just kind of faded, which is sad. And then there's Joanna Johnson as Jennifer, who's kind of, I wouldn't say the typical final girl in this movie because of the twist in this movie of there's possession involved as well as slashing. And I have to say her performance, especially late in the film, must be seen to be believed. She's credited as an introducing credit. I think it's her first feature film as maybe her starring role, and she gives it her all in this performance. She's maybe a little bland early on, but she really comes into her own. I loved her. So, like I said, it's a slasher, but it also becomes a possession movie, and I also like possession movies. You know, Exorcist obviously set the benchmark for them, but some of us like some of the rip-offs. And when it goes to that point in this movie, I just kind of fall in love. It becomes so much fun. How do you guys feel about this film?
Yeah, I agree with you. It was so much fun. It reminded me a lot of The Midnight Hour, actually. I thought it was more resonant with that than with even April Fool's Day, and that it just felt like you're at this killer party the whole time. But that it was what it was like, attending this amazing 80s party. I loved how colorful it was. It's one of the most colorful slasher movies I can recall. Such great 80s outfits and hair. I mean, it's really, really over the top, which I found very, very fun. I agree that the possession part was maybe my favorite sequence in the movie. I like when possessed people do like acrobatics. Like, I love, it's like Alki Summer in House of Exorcism does some of that too.
Yeah.
I don't just want the possessed person to lie in a bed spewing green vomit. I want them to be like jumping on top of buildings, and that happens here. I thought it was just pure 80s fun, and I cannot remember hearing anything about this movie until a few years ago I saw a poster for it in some book of 80s horror posters. I'd like to hear it if either of you know why it was so obscure.
Because I'd never heard of this one either until probably the late 90s, I'd say. I discovered it through Justin, who does the Hysteria website. So I don't know why. I don't remember ever seeing it on VHS when I was growing up. Yeah, so it definitely was an obscure one.
Yeah, I came across the video in the video store where I was living at the time, and they had pretty much a great selection of horror movies. And this the tape I think was by Key Video, which was a subsidiary of CBS Fox. I think it was later owned by Warner Brothers. Maybe wasn't as widely distributed as some of the other slasher movies at the time, so that's probably why you guys didn't really come across it as often, fairly early on.
Did it have a theatrical release?
Eric, I think you did a podcast on.
We did a podcast on this, but I cannot remember what we discovered about its theatrical life at all.
Yeah, I didn't see it in the theater. I don't remember it playing at the theater, at least where I was at the time.
So interesting. Maybe it was like Teen Witch, and they opened in like 4 theaters in weird places around the country, and then just to like then release it to cable and video immediately after that.
It's very possible.
I love that song though that you opened the podcast with. That because it always reminds me of Bananarama. I don't know I can't remember who the artist sings it is, but the one that these are the best times of our lives. That song. Great. Mm-hmm. And also that hair metal song at the start in the music video. I'm not a hair metal fan as such, but I thought that was kind of a good song as well. April, it was called, obviously.
Do you remember the band in the movie?
The called White singer. Lion or something? White Lion?
White Sister?
Yeah. Oh, Twisted Sister, is that what you said?
No, it's called White Sister.
Oh,
so
White
like
Sister,
White Snake
sorry.
meets Twisted Sister.
Oh,
White
right.
Sister. I have a white sister.
So do I.
And me too, while we're, talking about
Yes.
family.
Coincidentally. The lead singer of that band has the worst hair.
Yeah, it's kind of like he wants to be in a hair metal band, but his receding hairline is kind of stopping him. But it's not stopping him, unfortunately. Yeah, this was one of 3 April Fool's Day films from 1986, actually, because we had April Fool's Day as well, and also Slaughter High, which was originally called April Fool's Day. 1986 seemed to throw up 3 of them all at once.
There's an academic paper waiting to be written about that. Must have had something to do with Reaganomics or something.
It must have, yes.
We mentioned Ginny from April Fool's Day kind of had a Woody Allen or Annie Hall kind of look to her. I like that Vivia kind of had Annie Hall dialogue. She said something about like,
fat cucumber.
Well, there's that, which was clearly right out of a Woody Allen movie. Something about how I gargle with musk sounds very Woody Allen to me.
Yeah, it does.
And then touch me here, and she's pointing to her elbow. Kind of reminds me of like Play It Again Sam, like his character in that.
And what does I myself prefer a big fat cucumber remind you of?
Going to the supermarket, I think.
Yeah.
And you?
Reminds me of Amsterdam.
What stays?
Going to the vegetable stores in Amsterdam. What do you think of?
I like the bitchy blonde Veronica character.
Do you recognize Ralph Seymour from anywhere? Ralph Seymour, who played Martin in the film.
He's in a bunch of things, yeah.
Yeah, I know, but for me, probably most famous. He's not. Oh, he is. He is in Just Before Dawn. God, I was just checking there. He's in Just Before Dawn. He's the character who gets he whacks his head off a tombstone and gets killed by the natives.
I liked him in this movie.
He's also in Ghoulies.
Yeah, and Meatballs Part 2, which I just watched recently.
Oh.
He's always kind of like the slightly Goomba-ish or Guido-ish character.
There are rumors on IMDb that it took many years to shoot the film.
Oh, really?
Well, it says on IMDb they started filming in 1978, but that has to be a lie. There actually isn't a millisecond of that film that looks like it was shot in the 70s.
No. I asked my wife about this, and she said the movie looks totally 1984, 1985.
Yeah.
With the fashions. The mismatched socks and shoes look. Plus the music is very 84, 85.
Yeah.
The Laura Branigan stuff and everything else.
Is Laura Branigan on the soundtrack, yeah?
Yeah, she has a song called The Lucky One.
That's impressive.
Right. It's a good soundtrack. I wish it was available.
I like the idea that they started making it in 1978. Just the idea of like having, even though I'm sure you're right that it wasn't, but such dedication to spend so many years making Killer Party of all things.
The girl at the drive-in early on,
yes.
She has the loveliest crimped hair
I've
seen.
Yeah, and that definitely was not crimped. 1978. Yeah.
That is one of the most real crimp jobs I've ever seen.
Full-on crimped. It's like Frances O'Connor on American Horror Story. She's totally crimped in that one, I think. At least a season.
Yes, that is also an amazing. That's actually a really fabulous. But that's not quite an 80s crimp. It's more like transcends time. It's very Grace. It's like it's haute couture, high fashion creme. Killer Party was really a movie that made me just want to walk into the mid '80s and live there. It has that kind of quality. I guess in 1985, 86, or 84 to 86, that was like the height of 80s-ness, because Perfect, which we talked about last week, had that quality too. That just intense, excessive 80s aura.
Very. As we'd say over here, it fell off the 80s tree and hit every branch on the way down.
Yes, I like that.
And we love that.
Oh, yeah.
So there was another movie that we wanted to get to quickly before we left you.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
So I'm going to play
An obvious one.
We wanted
a movie that you're probably shocked we haven't talked about really in depth. So here it is.
It's Halloween, the night he came home, when the deepest fears are made real, when the darkest nightmares come true, when the most courageous soul cowers in the face of evil. First time on TV, the modern horror classic from John Carpenter. Parental discretion advised. This film contains elements of shock and suspense. And now, Halloween, you won't be watching it alone.
We wanted to have an even number 10, since we did our top, each of us did our top 3, and we wanted to talk about Halloween, the original, because we all love it. It's among our favorite movies, but it's also overdone. What can you say about Halloween that hasn't already been said? So we thought that it might be interesting to talk about the extra TV footage that was shot for the NBC premiere of Halloween on the set of Halloween 2. Just those scenes. We're just going to talk about those scenes, nothing else, not the rest of the movie, because they're pretty interesting, and they give us more Jamie Lee. I'm not going to describe each one of them. I think we'll probably just speak of them organically and fluidly. But what I do want to talk about briefly is how weird it was in the 80s, again, before the internet, and this happened with a lot of movies, where you would just be watching the movie. I remember watching Halloween on TV for the first time, and then it was just so surreal, because I was like, wait, did I not remember those scenes from the original movie? Like, or were they there? Is something happening here? Why are there these extra scenes? Like, what's happening? Like, it just wasn't something that, there was no background information for it, so it just seemed really bizarre that occasionally a movie would pop up on TV with random extra footage. I don't know if you guys remember having that experience too. Maybe you were more aware than I was.
Well, no, I didn't see the TV scenes until somebody sent me a special TV version of it, so I knew going in that there was going to be extra scenes in the film. But whenever it's shown on television over here, it's just shown in the normal theatrical cut, as far as I've ever seen anyway. So, I never got that shock. I did get that shock once watching, of all things, Jason Lives, Friday the 13th, Part 6, which had an extra scene thrown into the middle, because I was so familiar with the film, because I used to have it on VHS. And then I was watching it on BBC one night, and they had an extra scene thrown into the middle. And I was like, what? Where did this come from? Obviously, it was done to take out some gore and throw in some innocuous scene to replace it. But no.
That shocks me. Is that on the Blu-ray?
It's not. No, it's a scene where the policeman who gets locked. Tommy locks him into the police cell. Yeah. Tommy, and it cuts back to him shouting for help outside the window, going, "Let me out! Somebody let me out!" Blah blah. And that's all it is really. But I always remember that scene, and it's never reappeared since.
I know, like the Halloween TV version was always the talk of on the playground.
Oh, really? So people would talk about anytime the extra scene?
Yeah, anytime it would air, we would talk about it. Like, do you remember that scene?
Laurie's blouse.
No, not so much the blouse, but how it builds up the mythology with Michael Myers and then expands on it in Part 2 with her being his sister.
Yeah, what do you guys think about bringing up the possibility of Laurie being his sister in the original, in that revisionist way? How does it grab you?
It doesn't bother me. I saw Halloween 2 before I saw Halloween 1, so I knew going in that they'd already done that. So seeing the TV version, it didn't bother me. I mean, I thought that all those scenes integrated quite well into it, apart from the scene where Linda goes to borrow Laurie's blouse, because Laurie is there with her hair tied up in a towel, obviously because they didn't want to put her in that hideous wig again in broad daylight. And I just think Jamie Lee Curtis looks so different. She looks more like the Trading Places era Jamie Lee than she does the Halloween era, and that's why that scene is kind of jarring to me.
I love that they were so clever that they watched the movie, and in the theatrical version when Linda is like, "Oh, don't tear my blouse, you idiot, it's expensive." They were like, "Oh, that's what the extra
yeah
about." So you watch it, oh my god, that's why, because it was Laurie's blouse. That's gonna tear it.
Let's follow the blouse thread and see where it takes us. Yeah.
My favorite part about, though, of course, even though it's the most jarring scene in the TV version, that's by far my favorite TV scene, is the blouse scene, and I was just so thrilled that they revealed Annie's room when you see her on the phone. And of course it's a mess, because Annie's room would be.
It would be. Yeah. I also like the fact that Laurie is supposed to be the unfashionable, untrendy one, and yet they all want to borrow her blouse.
That's a good point.
It just seems so weird, I guess. But again, I conferred with my wife and the fashion expert of the family. And she confirmed that teenage girls borrowed each other's clothes all the time. And although they're looking at Laurie's clothes, you wouldn't think that she'd be the one they were borrowing from. But
it's probably this blouse that she got, but she's too afraid to wear it because it's too bold.
Yeah, that's probably what it is.
Still has the price tag on.
That makes sense.
I like the way they recap on the "I Wish I Had You All Alone" song as well.
Yes.
Oh, can we play that?
Okay.
Wish I had you all alone. Just the two of us. I would hold you close to me. So close to me. Just the two of us. So close to me.
On the recent Halloween Blu-ray, she says that she came up with that song herself. It was something she had to improvise on the set of the original Halloween. And I think she says it was incredibly mortifying. And she doesn't say it exactly, but the vibe I got from her is that it was even more mortifying than having to get her knockers out for Trading Places, was having to improvise a song.
And surprisingly, she has become iconic for the knockers, but not for the singing.
Yes.
Well, for me, she'll always be iconic for her singing.
Yeah. Because it's a great track. I'd love to hear a proper remix.
Totally.
Yeah, totally.
Then Halloween, that wasn't even intentional, but yes. Then Halloween could rightfully take its place along with Robert Altman's Nashville as another masterpiece musical in which the actors wrote their own songs.
Oh, I see. So I wonder if Annie wrote her...
My Paul, yeah.
Oh, Paul's song, yeah. Is that her creation?
Nancy Loomis is always very MIA in discussions of the original Halloween. I've had a million different DVDs and Laserdiscs, and I'm sure I've seen her on some documentary, but I don't really remember any of her stories about it.
No, she's on apparently the new Scream, I think it's Scream Factory's release of Assault on Precinct 13. She's got a 15-minute featurette on that. But I haven't seen this, though.
Yeah, I did see that. It was pretty cool to check out, seeing her after all these years.
She's an artist,
just thinking back at the scene itself with Laurie in her clothes, do you think it's possible that our friends, even though that Laurie was the really uncool nerd one, that they secretly really envied her? And they're bothering her, both of them.
That's totally likely. They're kind of obsessed with her.
Kind of, yeah.
She is the most... What do you want to be when you're a teenager? You kind of want to be an individual, and she is the most... Well, maybe you don't know. Maybe you want to be like everybody else, which Linda's much more successful at. But I don't know. There's something... Laurie has a mystique, and you think that maybe they're drawn to that mystique and want to emulate it by wearing her clothes.
I can understand why. I mean, we all love Jamie Lee.
Yeah, I'd wear her blouse.
Just don't tear it.
I won't, idiot.
thing I'll say about the TV footage is that I really enjoy the way that the scene in the mental institution office is shot with the circular tables, just because, and they're orange, and they're just so fabulously 70s that they don't fit with the Halloween aesthetic at all, but I kind of like them anyway. The board meeting with Dr. Loomis and the stupid hospital administrators.
I like that scene. It just goes maybe slightly too long.
Oh, yeah, it's totally...
It's clearly filler.
Yeah.
That part of it, at least.
The blouse scene is completely filler as well, surely.
And yet that doesn't go on nearly long enough.
Right. There could have been a whole movie about that one.
About borrowing
and a whole movie
blouse.
where they...
Borrowing Laurie's blouse is a good title for a movie.
Doing a band.
Or a band.
Or a band, yeah.
I don't like to see that. If they had lived, they would have been in a band, an all-girl band, like Valley of the Dolls or Beyond the Valleys.
Yeah, this is something I've always wondered. What do you think the three of them would have done as adults if they had lived? Do we have time to discuss this on the podcast? It's obviously, it's just, like fantasy life.
Maybe it's a question we could leave to our audience.
Okay.
What do you think?
Yes.
Put it right about it.
Laurie obviously would...
Oh, go on.
Well, I was going to say, Laurie would go on to be a best-selling author. Annie would be in a punk band and then burn out when she's about 28. I'm not sure about Linda. Prostitute?
Linda.
No, Linda would just get married.
I think Linda gets knocked up by Dennis Quaid.
I could see Annie... what could I see Annie doing? I sort of assumed she went to like a small liberal arts college on the East Coast. Well, I guess that's more Laurie's scene. But I could see both of them doing that, and then Annie also becoming somehow involved with like literary culture. Because she has such a sharp wit, But I guess I could also see the punk rock thing too.
Mm.
Maybe she starts off in a punk rock band, and then she ends up being like a socialite somehow.
A socialite?
Yeah. Like she marries some really rich guy.
Yeah.
And she's on a board of trustees. She suddenly becomes responsible.
Annie Kardashian or something.
I don't like that at all. I mean, I can see it, but that does not make me
Hey, I
happy.
didn't say the K word.
I'd want her to become a punk rocker, burn out, like you said, Eric, and then maybe like become a memoirist, / painter, like Mary Warrenov. Like write avant-garde memoirs and creepy novels. I don't know. I guess I really want Annie to end up being a writer. It's probably because I identify with Annie. Like, let's face it, I've always sort of wanted to be Annie, so now I want her to be me.
All right. So, audience,
no. But everybody
let
else
us know
write it on Meep's message board and tell us on his Facebook and tell us what you think.
Tell us.
Yes.
We really want to hear it. I wanted to read some top threes out before we left you. I asked a few of friends of the podcast and the page what their top 3 holiday horror movies are, and I just wanted to read some of those out before we left you guys. And here we go. Johnny Krug of Kruger Nation, he actually provided me the Killer Party Best Time song that started the podcast. His top 3 goes as this. Number 3, The Dorm That Dripped Blood. Number 2, Silent Night, Deadly Night. And number 1, Black Christmas. And my friend Brian Sauer of the Rupert Pupkin Speaks blog, his top 3 goes, number 3, Gremlins. Number 2, My Bloody Valentine. And number 1, April Fool's Day. Yay. Jeffrey Berg of JDB Records. Number 3, New Year's Evil. Number 2, Black Christmas. And number 1, Halloween from 1978. Couple more here. Tim Murdoch from Happy Horror Time. Number 3, My Bloody Valentine. Number 2, Silent Night, Deadly Night. And number 1, April Fool's Day. So April Fool's Day getting the love. McReady Mike, who's a co-administrator on my page. Number 3, he went for Halloween 2. Number 2, Silent Night, Deadly Night. And number 1, Halloween, John Carpenter's. And Jeff Nelson, who's a head honcho at Shout Factory, Scream Factory, who released some of these wonderful Blu-rays that we might have mentioned. He picked 3 Christmas movies to start. Number 3, he chose Don't Open Till Christmas. Number 2, Silent Night, Deadly Night. And number 1, Black Christmas. And then I asked him for his general holidays horror list, and he chose number 3, Black Christmas. Number 2, My Bloody Valentine, and number 1, Halloween. John Carpenter's, obviously. So it gives you an idea of what people love horror holiday-wise. And let us know what you like. Give us your top 3s, and I'll possibly read them out in the next podcast. So that's it for the show. Thank you guys so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And Ben, we could find you at what's your blog again?
I don't even know what Google Eyes of Ben Sher, and you'll find my blog. And I also co-write a column for Chiller TV called The Friday 13. So if you go there, usually every other week or so, one of my articles pops up, although it's sort of random. So just look every week and see if you find one.
And Eric?
I don't really have a web presence apart from on the Hysteria Continues podcast. You can find it on iTunes or just Google the Hysteria Continues, and we're in there somewhere. And we're recording a new episode tomorrow for Friday the 13th, the final chapter.
It's a really fun podcast. I urge you guys to check it out. You can find me at cinemademete.com and on iTunes and at Facebook. Cinema
and on
Demete.
sleazy street corners in a short dress. No?
Possibly. Depends on the day.
All right.
If I'm feeling up to it. Thank you guys so much for joining me today, and hope you have a very Merry Christmas and otherwise.
Yes, happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you. You too. Yes, happy holidays, indeed.
And we're going to go out with a little song, and here it is.
Once upon a time, on a sad Valentine, in a place known as Hanniger Mine, a legend began. Every woman and man would always remember the time, and those who remained were never the same. You could see the fear in their eyes. Once every year, as the 14th draws near, there's a hush all over the town. For the legend, they say, on a Valentine's Day is a curse that'll live on and on, and no one will know as the years come and go of the horror from long time ago. Years came and went, and everyone spent the 14th in quiet regret. And those still alive know the secret survives in the darkness that looms in the night. For the legend, they say, on a Valentine's Day is a curse that'll live on, and no one will know as the years come and go of the horror from long time ago. In this little town, when the 14th comes round, there's a silence and fear in the air. Remember the morn that the legend was born, all the shock and the horror was there. Or the legend, they say, on a Valentine's Day is a curse that'll live on, and no one will know as the years come and go of the horror from long time ago. And no one will know as the years come and go of the horror from long time ago.
Stop it, please, for God's sake, please stop it. There's no more time. You've got to, please, stop it now. Turn it off. Turn it off. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it.